found a book that's like 1,000 ridiculous and obscure words.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to try to employ some of those in the future.
Yeah, I hope you do so adroitly.
What is it, Star Wars or something? Anyway, we better get into it because it's Podrzebie, the comic book nerdcast that dares to ask, what? Me worry? I'm your idiot, Kyle Bridget, and with me, your co-idiot,
Patty McInerney.
All right, well, we better move on to our first department.
Ding, ding. That's the wrestling bell. Welcome to the Phony Jabroni department.
That's right. A little over a month back, in honor of Canadian Thanksgiving, we looked at the Great White North album. And now, in honor of American Thanksgiving, we're looking at a different Thanksgiving tradition, the WWF Survivor Series.
That's right, it's Turkey Day, it's Survivor Series, everybody's all excited, the hair on the back of the neck standing up, the blood's pumping through the heart, and there's a reason these yellow ribbons are on the 2x4. Tell them about it, Hulkster.
You know, that's right, tough guy. The first thing in our sights is we've got our focuses on winning the Survivor Series and proving that the Hulkamaniacs can't survive, brother. But the reason we're also here is we're dedicating this match to all the men and women all over the world who are all Hulkamaniacs, man, serving and fighting for our country, but especially the men and the women over there in the Middle East right now, brother, that are hanging on and fighting for all of us, brother.
And we've got a special guest idiot with us today. Patrick, do you want to introduce him?
Yes, this is a childhood friend, musical influence, and cassette tape buying friend of mine, Chaz Kangas. Can I use your last name on this?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's my real name is my stage name because it sounds incredibly fake to begin with. So,
all right.
Yeah, happy to join you idiots in this great stream of idiocy we can bring forward.
Yeah. Cup of coffee in the big time, idiot-wise.
Cream of the
crop. Cream rises to the top, Gene.
I was sad he didn't say that in this episode.
Well, the Gulf War was happening, so I mean, there was a cream. Would have been too heelish.
They wanted to be sensitive for sure.
Yeah,
Kyle, when you suggested doing this, though, I was immediately thought of you, Chaz Kangas, because I mean, like, one, I've known since high school you have been the wrestling guy. You also bought me a Hulk Hogan rap cassette tape. The Hulkamaniacs rapping cassette tape.
Hulk Hogan and the Wrestling Boot Band, yeah.
Yeah, and that song still pops into my head, like, the rap that he did.
Oh,
Can you sing us a little bit?
It's like, I want to be a Hulkamaniac, have fun with my family and friends. And then Terry would come in and be like...
Terry Bollea?
Yeah, don't do drugs, always study, and if you leave home, bring a buddy.
It's funny to say that line because, not to correct you on your own podcast, but I remember before I got you a copy, we were in my mom's car and we had a cassette player and I just slid it in, and I think it was like your first time hearing it.
Yeah.
And I just remember, and I hadn't heard it in a while because I had it from childhood. And the line was, always go swimming with a buddy, work real hard and always study. And because I remember the opening line is, if you want to be a Hulkamaniac, I can show you how to stay on track. Gotta train, say your prayers, eat your vitamins too. These are the things that the Maniacs do.
Sorry, I just want to know, was this produced by the WWF?
No, this was after he left the WWF. He was in WCW at the time, and it was entirely produced by Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart, who who handled like in the 80s and the 90s, and who we saw tonight managing, or in this what we're watching today, managing the Rhythm and Blues team of the Honky Tonk Man and Greg the Hammer Valentine. But prior to being involved in wrestling, and he was a big part even pre-WWF, he was part of Memphis with the whole Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler feud, among other things. And before that, he was actually part of notable 60s group The Gentrys, whose hit Keep On Dancing, I believe, went to number 2 in the country.
Huh.
Like, it was a legitimate musical hit. He has always, when he's been with WWF, WWE, WCW, he's worked in their music departments. So
Yeah. He's written a lot of the songs and stuff, and probably gets a lot of royalties from that, I imagine.
Probably not, actually, but
I'm sure he gets some.
Yeah, I'm sure it gets people happy to be reminded that he did those songs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I was just thinking, like in WWF, they did like Pile Driver. They had like a whole album of music and stuff that had Hulk Hogan in it. I didn't remember that from there, but so I was surprised when it was a rap. I was like, I thought it was more of a slow jams.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, the Hulk album does have some slow jams on it. There's a ballad for a fictional Make-A-Wish child that the way to find out the story doesn't exist, called Hulkster in Heaven. About how when he goes to heaven, he's looking forward to seeing this kid again.
When the Hulkster comes to heaven, 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 we'll tag up again, again, again. The world just explodes. Another Hulkamaniac, our friend to the end. I'll see you again. I wish Hulk's love could bring you back again.
Can't wait to see all those dead kids, brother.
Yeah, there's a few rap songs on there. There's one called Beach Patrol, which is about him walking around the beach hitting on women. The opening track is actually a really good cover of it online. I can't remember who does it, but the opener is a track called "The Hulkster's in the House," to which the chorus is "The Hulkster's in the house. Check him out. Check him out." And
how do they come up with this stuff?
The cover online begins with like a fake horror movie scene with someone going, "The Hulkster is coming from inside the house." But yeah,
that's a real horror.
Yeah, it's that could be a whole podcast unto itself. Hulk Hogan and the Wrestling Boot Band, which the whole band, it's him, Jimmy Hart's recording partner, and Hulk Hogan's one-time wife, now bitterly divorced ex-wife, Linda Balea.
Yeah. Okay, well,
but today we're talking about Brooke Hogan. That's the important thing. We're talking about the Brooke Hogan albums.
There you go. Well, we'll get into that. I'm sure that'll come up just naturally as we go through this. We're looking at Survivor Series from 1990, but before we get into it, I like to hear how people got into whatever it is we're talking about, in this case, wrestling. So, Chaz, what was your path to wrestling?
So wrestling's kind of just been in my family's blood by sheer chance. My great-grandfather, when he came to this country from Finland, he had a bar called the Kangas Cafe, which we started during Prohibition, so it was just Kangas Cafe, but they eventually would sell the alcohol with it. And I found this after my own father's passing last December. I looked it up, and going back to the 40s and earlier, it was at the Kangas Cafe. It was one of 3 spots in Minnesota you could go to buy tickets for wrestling shows. So my great-grandfather had an interest in the grappling arts, as it were. And then when my grandparents, during the time of the dawn of television, Gorgeous George was one of the biggest stars on TV, along with Milton Berle. And Minnesota was a huge hotbed for it during my dad's years growing up with the AWA, Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association. And also my mom went to high school with our future governor, Jesse the Body Ventura, who remains a wonderful guy to us to this day. And
listen, we got to take a second here because Patrick's been working on his impression of Jesse the Body Ventura, and he's going to interrupt and do it. So,
yeah.
All right, hold on. Hold on. I'm going to go off mic to practice it. I got to get.
He's got to warm up the pipes.
Hello, this is Jesse the Body Ventura, and I'm here with Chaz Kangas and Kyle Bridget on Podrzebie, the comic book nerdcast that dares to ask, what me worry?
That's the best I can do.
Love it.
With such little warm-up, I'm sorry.
There you go. I would have thought you've been warming up all day for this.
Oh.
Well, I'm already warmed up so much to the both of you. So, yeah, and so in terms of just like me watching wrestling, like every kid when they're to like the 4 or 5 years old, they go through the time when they get into it, and I have memories of Saturday morning WWF Superstars coming on and going to seeing wrestling at the Target Center back in '91. I still vividly recall like the Ultimate Warrior bursting out of the Undertaker's body bag and Jake the Snake Roberts Snake, and then as a kid, like your interests kind of wane and vary. And then I remember in 4th grade, I got really into the video game WrestleMania, the arcade game, because it was from the makers of the Mortal Kombat video games. And so I rented a video strategy guide on how to play the game, and just seeing all these wrestlers looked like and acted like and sounded like comic book characters come to life.
I have one more bonus mayhem move. The Demon Dizzy. Hit down, away, and kick. Rest in peace.
And I'm like, oh man, they're just like the comic characters I play or the fighting game, but they're actually real and they actually do fight weekly. So that got me into watching it, and that was of course '96. And later that year, you had the influx of the NWO and WCW, and you had the return of Bret Hart and WWF, and the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then from there, it was off to the races. So I got into wrestling like just enough before the big pop culture explosion of it to appreciate it as this like niche interest that then went mainstream. So start of high school, kind of lost interest in it for a while around 2000, got back into it like around the midpoint of high school. Can't remember what triggered it, but something happened. And then, yeah, started college, waned, and then got back to it after that. And it's just dated a wrestler just after college.
Anyone we know?
No.
Well, listen, this guy loves Robert Crumb. So what were her thighs like?
Oh, they were an American Splendor. No, that's the other guy, not Crumb.
That's Picar and
Picar,
what's his
yeah.
face?
Harvey Picar, yeah. Yeah, they were crumulent. Yeah. You wouldn't know her, but like the people she had a debut match with someone who's currently of note, who I'm not going to mention because I don't want, with how the wrestling like internetscape works, I don't want someone walking up to her and be like, hey, yeah, I saw your first match. It was with, and then and then, people feigning the closeness. But I digress. Yeah. I only want to like feign closeness if it's involving like me directly. Yeah, and especially now, like I moved back to Minneapolis in 2016, and there's just such a wonderful, fervent hotbed of wrestling out here, especially First Wrestling, which runs at First Avenue, which listeners may know as where the Prince movie Purple Rain was shot. It's they run a fantastic show. Shouts out to Eric Cannon and the whole First gang. So it's a part of my life that I enjoy. And it's funny because when talking to people, because like I mentioned, when everyone goes through the wrestling phase, when they find out the results are predetermined, that makes them like it less. Whereas as a kid, it made me like it more because I'm like, wow, they're convincing this entire audience full of people that they're really fighting when they're just kind of cool with just pretending to fight each other and simulating combat. Like that's the dream. So and then from there, just like how like when I love going to concerts, I love sitting at the very front of the balcony and seeing the performance on stage, and then seeing the entire audience, how they all react to that beneath that, or when I'm seeing a musical or seeing any sort of performance, or seeing battle rap. Like wrestling gives me the exact same vibes and satisfaction and enjoyment, getting caught up in the moment.
There's a really good essay written by Roland Barthes. I don't know if you've heard that. He's like a semiotics guy, really famous. I think he's French. But he wrote an essay on wrestling and like the symbolism of wrestling. And in the essay, he talks about, no, you can't expose it. He's like, this is Shakespeare. Like this is such important entertainment. Like they know it's fake. You need to celebrate like what it means, what these symbols mean, what it means to be like the heel versus the face, and what that means as a culture to witness this.
Yeah. And also, you mentioned the culture thing, and what I love about it is it really is one of those mediums that you can really see the regionality reflected in the different performances of it. Like, Memphis style wrestling is very different from New York style wrestling, which is very different from a lot of the West Coast style wrestling. And even when you get into other countries, you have the Pureso strong style in Japan, you have the luchadors in Mexico, you have the World of Sports style over in Europe. And, at its core, it is all like predetermined, but at different levels of, pageantry playing to the crowd, different levels of morality plays, different levels of the human spirit overcoming. Like, for instance, like in Japan, they don't have the heel face dynamic that we do with them. It's often seen in like groups of factions, and it's just you decide, who your ideology aligns more with, who you want to cheer. And and sometimes the people who normally be seen as like the beloved good guys, if they have a good reason to cheat, the audience will cheer along with that. Whereas out here, we boo the cheaters in America, unless they look really cool doing it. Because it was in the late 90s. We were all drinking Surge and wearing our Jenko jeans.
Well, you're saying about sort of regional differences here in Nova Scotia. We have kind of a rivalry with the province beside us, which is New Brunswick, and especially Halifax, where I am, and Moncton there. So it's like if you go to a local wrestling event here, anybody who's from Moncton, if you're watching it in Halifax, they're automatically a bad guy. So you just see people come out and they're like, they announce someone will be like, from Moncton, and they come out, they're obviously supposed to be a face, and just immediately boo, boo.
Yeah, no, that happens here when someone announces coming from Green Bay, Wisconsin, they'll get booed. Then the heel will whisper something to the announcer, and the announcer will say, "I've been corrected from Titletown, Green Bay, Wisconsin," and they boo even harder.
All right, what about you, Patrick? What's your opinion on wrestling? We haven't really talked about this before.
No, we haven't. I got into wrestling. When I got into wrestling, it was WCW. So I guess that's like mid 90s. That's probably when it happened. And my dad was friends. I don't know how he became friends with, but the son of Mean Gene Okerlund. And so when I was like in that age range of like 8, 9, or 10, he'd bring me to the WCW events at the Target Center in downtown Minneapolis, and we'd always get like not ringside. Well, I guess like a lot of times like where it's flat, right? You're like not in the stands. Is that all ringside?
It's considered like the ringside
Right.
area.
Yeah, and so
floor
like
seats, as they're also known.
floor seats. That's what it was. We would have floor seats. The memory is burned into my mind of Hulk Hogan throwing Ric Flair into the floor seats. And it's like I had these weird little white hairs that like floated off of him on me. It's like,
You got flared.
I got flared, man. It was nuts. But it was
It never occurred to me that he must be just going around shedding white hair everywhere he goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And onto little prepubescent boys.
Gotta make you man somehow, Patty.
It's a living.
To be the
But it was
man,
like-
you gotta get the hair of the man. Is what.
Imagine you're a wrestler, you're all oiled up, you're wrestling Ric Flair. You must just like have like a coating by the time you're done.
Yeah.
Then that's a blessing, dude.
You've been anointed.
Yeah. But anyway, so I had like this really like I don't know, like a silver spoon entrance into wrestling, because I would get brought back sometimes, like when it was my birthday, and I think it was like my 10th birthday, the Road Warriors picked me up and threw me back and forth 10 times, which again, horrible experience. This is the scariest thing ever, man. They were like wearing their shit. I was like,
Like the spikes, like.
yes. Yeah. But that's what got me into it, were those experiences, and then watching it on like TBS and TNT. So like my dad had a working relationship with Mean Gene Okerlund, and this shirt, the burger this is by me, this is the one I had this since high school.
Can you see it? Yep, Mean Gene's Burgers.
And this is your chance to order a Mean Gene t-shirt. Mean Gene's Burgers.
The burger that says, "Bite me."
Wear it to work, to a party, to your next court appearance, wherever you want to make a real fashion statement. Call the number on your screen and order yours now.
I didn't know what that was about.
Yeah, Mean Gene's Burgers was, my dad did all the writing for it, like for the advertisements and everything. That's what he did by trade. And it was like truck stop food, basically. And it was actually really good. We got like just tons of frozen hot dogs and patties that we would eat.
Is that how you got your name?
Yeah, frozen patty. That's what they call me. It's either that or all beef.
Oh yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because actually on one of the wrestling Facebook pages that pops up in my feed on the Facebook.com, there was a discussion of Mean Gene's Burgers, and people, even though it's been out of business for a few years, because people were just wrestling fans and they just had loved seeing it, so people were sharing the photographs they took in the 90s of being at Mean Gene's Burgers locations all across the United States and Canada, and in a lot of the armed forces stations around the globe.
Oh, dude. Well, as we heard in the pay-per-view, they broadcast to the Armed Forces Network.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it costs a damn double.
Yeah. Yeah, take that. Saddam was watching and going, "No!"
That's why he lost that war.
Yep.
He
Yeah.
should have, instead of recruiting Sergeant Slaughter, he should have taken Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, he was like, Uday, did you fucking order this?
He could have jobbed out America. All right. Well, for me, I watched it when I was a very small child, Saturday mornings, and I watched the Rock and Wrestling show, and I was a mark for all the faces.
Oh, the cartoon, the Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember too much about it, but I did watch that on TV, and then I'd watch a little bit. I think it was on at the end of the Saturday morning cartoon block, so I would kind of sometimes keep watching. I was really into Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I remember that, of all people. I don't know why. But I had this distinct memory of my dad explaining wrestling to an uncle of mine or someone like that. And he was talking about how it was fake and the wrestlers were all roided up, and as a result, they were all bald and their penises were all shrunken. And so I kind of stopped watching it, you know, because it was no big deal. I wasn't interested in sports, and also I didn't want my penis to shrink. But I liked fighting games, like you, and my buddy talked me into renting WCW versus NWO World Tour for the Nintendo 64. Best game series ever. And I loved it so much, I started watching WCW, and NWO was just blowing up at the time, and I realized it was kind of awesome. And I gradually shifted to WWF around the time Chris Jericho went, because he was probably my favorite WCW guy at the time. Anyway, the thing I really learned about that was that what's really fun about watching wrestling was watching it with your friends. And so I kind of moved, when I moved from where I was, I didn't have any wrestling buddies anymore, so I kind of stopped watching. But, you know, I remember when, like, the Monday Night Wars were going on, you know, you'd be flipping through WWF, WCW, you'd be calling up your friends, you'd be talking about it the next day. And we also started renting older pay-per-views from the video store. And that was always fun because you'd get to see these silly gimmicks that people had before wrestling got serious. And I had my best friend Nick at the time. He would always root for the opposite guy as me. I don't think it was intentional. It just, we were always on opposite sides of the heel face divide. Even though sometimes I'd like a heel, sometimes he'd like a face.
Some boys love Dino Bravo.
Yeah, it was perfect. And so nowadays I mostly just consume it as live events, just locally. But I think it's a cultural experience unlike anything else. And I urge anyone to go give it a try if you've never been to a live wrestling event. It's
So
incredible.
who's your local promotion out there in Nova Scotia? Is that, I'm trying to think of like the Canadian promotions I know, and I don't want to mention the wrong one. Who do
You're
you
putting
see?
me on the spot. I can't remember what it is. It keeps switching around right
Okay.
now. It's like very small where I am because Nova Scotia is like a peninsula. So it's like when wrestlers come here, it's like there's nowhere else to go from there. So often they don't come. And I know it keeps shuffling around. So it's all the same wrestlers, but the name of the promotion keeps changing.
Because I want to say like Ethan Page wrestled out there for a time, who's now in AEW. Who's also a great guy.
Maybe.
Yeah, because a lot of Canadian wrestlers also wrestle in Minnesota now because we are a suburb of Canada essentially. So,
That's what I was telling him.
I think the biggest wrestler from Nova Scotia is probably The Rock's dad, Rocky Johnson.
Yep.
I think there should be a statue of him here because, like, he's a really kind of one of the more famous Black Nova Scotians. There's like a historic Black population here, like it has its own Wikipedia page, Black Nova Scotians, and he's a big one. I think he's an interesting guy, you know. Anyway, so we watched Survivor Series 1990. This is the fourth Survivor Series. It was at the Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut. And if you haven't seen a Survivor Series, it's a gimmick pay-per-view where the main part of the card is a series of 8-man elimination tag matches.
originally it was 5-on-5 because Survivor Series actually predates SummerSlam, predates the Royal Rumble. The Survivor Series is really the second major WWF entity to try to say, hey, we make all this pay-per-view money. Let's create another show. How can we do something different? Let's make it like a real spectacle. And someone, might have been Vince, might have been Pat Patterson, might have been Bruce Pritchard, who came up with teams of 5 strive to survive. And so, you know, it rhymes. So yeah, let's make a pay-per-view out of it. So
I did not remember that. I mentioned OSW Review. I've watched their whole series, so they went through the Hulkamania era pay-per-view by pay-per-view, so I'm sure they covered the first Survivor Series. But
I think it was like
anyway.
the one prior to the one we watched, the 89 one that might have been the first 4-on-4 one.
Okay.
Yeah, that 87 one did have a 10-on-10 one because they had 5 tag teams on it, and that's just too many dudes for.
I remember that.
Yeah.
What stood out to me is that wrestling promoters are absolute geniuses. Like everything about that. 5 strive to survive, just like the whole Survivor Series. Their gimmick for this revealed at the end. Every part of it I love. Unironically, just like as I was watching it and truly enjoying every part of this.
Well, it's
Now, when you say the gimmick revealed at the end, do you mean the grand finale match?
No, the thing that happened right before the grand finale.
Oh, that one. Okay, yeah.
the true main event.
We'll get to that. So we start the pay-per-view with Vince running down the card. We'll mention the teams when we get to the matches. But I thought it was funny on the graphics, the faces are all on the left and the heels are all on the right. It's like there could be no ambiguity about who's who. Even Volkov, the picture of him, there's a little bit of an American flag in the photo, just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a good guy now. And the announcers were Gorilla Monsoon and Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I love both those guys. I think they're both two of the all-time greats on the stick. They do not have good chemistry together.
No, I didn't think so at all. You want, who do you want? You want Jesse Ventura or someone.
Yeah,
you
or
know,
Bobby
with
Heenan.
Monsoon.
Usually you want, because usually it's like, you want the play-by-play and then you want the color alongside that. And usually the color comes in the form of, the heel, the person who roots for the bad guy. Or you have like the good guy who's the charismatic guy, saying his little, like the Dusty Rhodes side of thing where he's peppering in just those little, here's what I'd do, baby, if I was in there on the comeback. Oh, he got him. Oh, that got that. I do not do the great Dusty Rhodes. Unless I'm saying the phrase scattered thunderstorms, then I can sound a lot like him. Scattered thunderstorms, daddy. Okay, that's it. It's not great. But I digress. But like when you have just like the two good guys rooting for the good guys who are just kind of doing the face observation, play-by-play good guy sort of thing, and because it'd even be different too if you had like Vince to do kind of the play-by-play, because Vince had good chemistry with Hot Rod. Because at that point, like on Saturday Morning Superstars, the commentary team was Vince, Piper, and the Honky Tonk Man being the heel. But when you just have like the two good guys rooting for the good guys and not giving you any other kind of perspective, except there's one match where Piper's being openly contentious against the good guys, but we'll get to that one.
Yeah, I kind of thought I thought maybe Piper was a heel or something. When I first heard it was going to be him, I was like, oh, maybe he was a heel at this point.
Yeah, no, this is post day Luke Piper. You can't boo that guy.
It was really strange, though. It seemed like he didn't want to say anything mean about any of the wrestlers. At one point, he's like, listen, I respect everybody in here. I'm so proud of
Yeah. I'm
God
proud of
damn,
them as
dude.
comrades and frat brothers. So,
Like, say
And so they mentioned that in addition to the matches that are going to happen, the Survivor Series matches, there's going to be a final finale match where they take the survivors and they team them up. So I guess it could be anybody. I was very excited. Surely it won't come down to faces against heels, I'm sure. So, I was very excited to see where that was going to come. And they also introduce the special attraction, a giant mystery egg that promises to hatch at some point.
And let's not forget, Hot Rod, about that humongous Brontosaurus Rex egg over there that's going to be hatched here. Did you see the size of that? That's big enough to feed an army. Speaking of...
What could be in there?
and that had been promoted for like, I believe, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It's a very hot topic in the wrestling realm at the time.
Yeah. What could it be?
All right, I like your boy Mean Gene saying, maybe it's the Playmate of the Year.
Well, when he says that, the crowd pops. They're like, woo!
Yeah.
And you can just see in his face, he's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I think right before that, he said, what could it be? Balloons?
Yeah.
The Playmate of the Year?
All things that come out of eggs.
Yeah. I mean, Playmate of the Year, that would probably have gone over really well. Anyway, we'll see what happens.
It would have been the band Zebrahead playing the song Playmate of the Year.
Oh, and also WWF is broadcasting to the military TV channel for all the troops in Desert Storm.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we caught this already, but Saddam Hussein, he has to pay double.
Yeah, Piper points that out. WWE's always had WWF too has had a strong relationship with the armed forces. In 2003, the brainchild of John Cena was to start doing tribute for the troops during the second Iraq War, where they would fly over to Iraq at a military base and do a show, and that became an every year thing. And then once the Iraq War ended, then they started just doing them like at military bases here in America. And to this day, they do the tribute to the troops, and they have like the Kid Rock and the Muppets come out and different Florida Georgia Line, just pure Tinseltown.
But it's kind of funny because you watch like this sort of, not just this pay-per-view, but maybe the next two, where it's the whole Desert Storm era. And it's like they are so callous in just exploiting this, conflict.
Saddam Hussein, they should call him so damn insane.
Hey, you're just fanning the flames of hatred.
Yeah. Now, just when you thought the desert couldn't get any hotter, it's the Cincinnati Bengal cheerleaders!
I can't look at that. I have a girlfriend back home.
This is an insult to our Muslim hosts.
It's embarrassing that they're for the troops. It's like
And then they did it again 12 years later for that second Iraq War. But that might be a podcast for a different time.
But that one lasted a little longer. This one, it's like they have like heel and face turns that are like, okay, we got to reverse those immediately because this thing's over.
Well, yeah, it's like the second Iraq War lasted long enough for us to become cynical about it. The first one was like, boop, 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 taking care of business, man. TCB in a flash.
Yeah, do you both have memories as a kid of the first Iraq War?
Mostly just the Wind Beneath My Wings song, which was like the official song of the war, I believe.
I think you're using the war with Johnny Carson's retirement.
No, but isn't that the song? Wasn't that the song? You are the wind
not
beneath
the
my
late
wings.
night wars, all right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about the war between Letterman and Leno, okay?
Yeah, I thought it was the God Bless the USA, the Lee Greenwald.
Oh, yeah.
That was the big first Iraq War song.
I thought it was the wind. You are the wind beneath my wings.
I am
I don't
proud
know.
to be an American where at least I know I'm free.
We didn't get that one as much in Canada.
Autumn mist in the land of Honolulu, and I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. Because I'm proud to be an American. God bless the USA.
No,
that came out for Desert Storm?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, weird.
That song,
I think 10 years later, we had
rules.
the remix for.
Yeah.
Huh. Anyway, I remember it a little bit. I was in like grade 2, I think. And I didn't really understand what was going on that much, other than that something was going on.
No, I have no memories of it.
Yeah. I remember my parents sitting me down because I was watching a lot of G.I. Joe at the time and Swamp Thing and playing the Swamp Thing toys. Distinctly, I remember it. And I remember my parents like trying to explain like what war was to a 5-year-old and the sort of the conflict thing that was. They didn't go to details. They weren't telling me like, Saddam was gassing the Kurds. They were just, telling me like what war was because it kept interrupting my cartoons to show war footage and the certain level of irony of them interrupting like G.I. Joe cartoons to show actual war things. But then this is also the time when G.I. Joe, I remember, I believe it was the same year, right around the same time when you started having the war adjacent, like out there G.I. Joe plots where like G.I. Joe and Cobra had to team up to stop drug dealers who were getting the people on their teams addicted to drugs.
Oh, no. What is that? What was Reagan's wife's name?
Nancy.
Nancy Reagan got to G.I. Joe?
Yeah.
Edit that so the joke seems like I knew what I was talking about.
Anyway, I did look it up while we were talking here. Wind Beneath My Wings was made popular by Bette Midler during Desert Storm.
Gotcha.
So that song was everywhere.
Yep.
Maybe the other song just didn't make it popular in Canada, but
You just sort of conflated that it was the theme song in your child's mind. You're like,
well, I'm looking at
yeah.
Defense Visual Information Distribution Services. They've got an article on Wind Beneath My Wings, and the first line is, many people remember this song made popular by Bette Midler during Desert Storm. So it must have just been coincidence.
I'd love if the government put out a thing where they said, and our official theme of this war will be Bette Midler. Like,
That's it. It's like a wrestler.
Theme of the Gulf War. Yeah. Making parentheses at the end of the title. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Did you guys hear? Billie Eilish is getting the exclusive war rights to.
Ooh, that's a big property.
And gold for editing. All right.
Leave it in, Kyle.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Every time I get on this podcast with Patrick, he says something to like get rid of half of our audience.
I mean, really quick, this is just in terms of like things being the official things. I don't know if you have baseball in Canada, but Pat, sure, you'll know this. The Minnesota Twins, the baseball team out here. Do you remember when they had someone was the official magician of the Minnesota Twins? We had an official magician.
That's pretty good.
That's the pole ads, baby.
Yeah.
What kind of was he a good magician?
Yeah, he was very good. I recall him being an excellent magician, like a magician that you could definitely hang your helmet on.
Nice.
I would rewrite.
Yeah, because you don't want to be me and like the sleight of hand I do for my kid, because like not good.
I mean, I haven't seen. I have a feeling you're being modest. And holy,
not even that good.
Wow, I wouldn't say.
It's called a French drop.
I was hoping I had a quarter on my desk here, so I could be like, "Oh, I got it too."
A quarter on your desk? Or are you happy to see me? I'm gonna grab it.
Well, here I can make this disappear. Hold on, I'll just edit it. Hold on, just look away.
Yeah.
Woo.
Whoa.
Now, how in the H did he do that?
Get us back on track,
Magic. Kyle. All right, so the first match number 1, it's the Warriors. This is Ultimate Warrior, Hawk, Animal, and the Texas Tornado against the Perfect Team, which is Mr. Perfect, Demolition Axe, Smash, and Crush, with managers Bobby Heenan and Mr. Fuji. Apparently, heels all have managers at this point.
Well, you got to have a bad guy to watch your finances,
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So a few notes about this match. We're gonna go into total wrestling nerddom here. An inside joke, which is a thing for 90s WWF, for fans of and it's rare WWF would acknowledge the periphery of the rest of the wrestling world, because in WWF, it's like if it wasn't in WWF, it didn't happen. But the reason the team is called the Warriors is because you have the Ultimate Warrior, who originally wrestled as the Dingo Warrior. And then you have Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado, who before he was the Texas Tornado, when he was wrestling in World Class Championship Wrestling in Texas, he was called the modern day Warrior, Kerry Von Erich. And then you have the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal, who in the AWA,
Road Warriors.
The Road Warriors. So they had all the Warriors together on a team. And then you had Mr. Perfect, and then very near the end of their WWF run, you had Demolition. Like someone had a sign on AEW a few weeks back that said, "Why was Demolition Axe's hair so nice at Survivor Series 90?" And it's true.
Because he got plugs.
Yeah. Well, it's because normally they do the slick back, like menacing looking thing. But if you look at Demolition Axe's hair, he just kind of just didn't touch it at all, and he just has a big, beautiful head of hair.
He's gone after this match, I think, isn't he?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and I think like Crush and Smash hung around for like 3 more months, then they were gone, and then Smash was given a new gimmick as the Repo Man, and Crush was now Kona Crush, tapping him back to his Hawaiian roots. But that's getting way ahead of us.
You would never recognize Smash as a Repo Man. It's like the biggest conversion ever, I think, of a wrestler that I've ever seen.
And then in WCW, he became the Blacktop Bully, who was a guy who would fight people on trucks. And then he later became the bad guy golfer, Hole-in-One Barry Darso, which the working title for his name before they went with, let's go in your real name. He wanted to call himself Stuart Payne after the golfer Payne.
I remember that. Wouldn't he come out with like a little putting green? He'd be like, if you can make the putt, you win. Yeah. And then when they turn their back, he'd just Pearl Harbor them.
Exactly. Did you use a Gorilla Monsoonism? Very nice. We're fully into the wrestling today, Jess. It's kind of a sad note too that Axe is by almost a decade the oldest guy in this entire match, and he is, I think, one of only 2 out of all 8 competitors who is still alive. The other being Demolition Smash.
Jeez.
Now that I brought the mood completely down,
I'm looking at the names. I'm like, is there anybody? Mr. Fuji, maybe?
No, he's gone away in 2016.
Okay, and Texas Tornado, he already had a dead foot at that point, right?
Correct. He lost half of his foot in a motorcycle accident, and then he committed suicide in 1993 when he was face.
Well, that part's sad. Losing the foot's kind of cool.
he became the Jim Abbott of the wrestling world for the world.
So Piper reminds us right off the bat that it's the team that survives, and the Ultimate Warrior says, amongst some other junk that I can't really decipher, that they developed an unbreakable bond. So will this be a clean sweep for the Warriors?
Dude, I didn't know that the Ultimate Warrior was so poetic. Like, a lot.
I don't know if poetic is quite the right term, but
I don't know. He's speaking in some deep analogies where he's like, we have this bond that he describes as like, I don't know, mystical and magical. And then later on in an interview, he's talking about skeletons that have
made
down
the sacrifice. Well, he has a holistic system of belief. You can actually buy this would be good for your channel. You can buy the Ultimate Warrior comic books that he wrote, which are a shit show. But he's got a big thing about
There's
it.
Only 4. You can get them all.
There's 4, but it's like Distrucity, I think it's called.
Yep. It comes from intensity, destruction. There's another word in there it's a whole portmanteau. As only the Ultimate Warrior can do. Yeah.
Wait, you mean a portmanteau?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you used that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how do I find Distrustity?
Distrucity.
I'm sorry. This is a new word to me.
The Warrior comes out. He gets a big pop. He's the world champion.
For any listeners who are on the East Coast, you got a big soda.
So anyway, he seems like he's crazy hot, but I think he's just at the beginning of his downward slide because he sort of like won the championship and then they didn't have anything to do with him after that. So he kind of
he was also notoriously awful to work with. Ultimate Warrior, he's not a good person. I say this as Patrick is
bad.
Halfway through reading his new Source of Life and Distrucity. Yeah, there's a lot to not like about Ultimate Warrior. Real name Jim Hellwig, who changed his name legally to Ultimate Warrior so WWF couldn't copyright it and he could use it wherever he wanted. That's a good thing he's done. So I'm not knocking him.
Okay, but listen, you can't knock his religious system based on the guy. You have to look at it on its own merits.
Right. Yeah. We can see the reflection in Patrick's eyes, like going on eBay right now and just getting every single the four tombs of the warrior.
I don't think they're hard to get. I think they're pretty easy to get.
The fourth one's a Christmas special.
Is it the third one where it's like he spends like 2 pages just like shitting on the artist of the past one for one to get paid?
I think so. Yeah. Not willing to make the sacrifice for the one.
Yeah.
This
Ultimate Warrior never made a sacrifice for anyone. That guy jobbed for no one, basically.
Yeah. He opened up a school that was around for, like, you could call it Warrior University around the time of the
my God.
I don't know, guys. This dude sounds like he fucking rules.
Yeah.
He's very interesting.
He's a compelling individual.
And anyway, so it's a bit of a curtain jerker. He is starting this off. He's a world champion. Does anyone have anything they want to add in particular before we sort of get to the finish?
Love Kurt Hennig. There's a number of Minnesota boys in this because Barry Darso, who's Demolition Smash, was here, and Patrick
Warrior Hawk. Wasn't he?
Hawk, yep, yeah, and Animal, both of them are Minnesotan, and actually, Smash and Hawk and Animal were bouncers at a club together called Grandma B's, which was later known as Gabby's, which most recently was known as Psycho Susie's before it closed.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, so Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, he's got to be the most talented of anyone in this match. I gotta imagine.
He could be the most talented person on the card. I can make the argument for. Just one
maybe
best to ever do it.
He's really good.
Him and Brett, I'd say, are the two best in the whole card in terms of
that's where I would have probably debated you, because I would have been like, Brett's pretty good, but he's not as good on the mic as Hennig.
Says the Canadian. Anyway, so
Brett is legit my favorite. I normally don't care about who's a Canadian and who's not, but I do like Bret Hart. I like how bitter he is.
I mean, if anyone has a right to be bitter about things, I'd say it's probably Bret. After kind of everything.
Talk about bitter. In the match he's wrestling tonight, his brother died the night before.
I forgot about that. That's insane that he did that. He just showed up and he did
Not
it.
The first time he'd wrestled the night after his brother died, or some other relative.
Yeah, the Harts. No, I think actually this was the first time that he wrestled after a Hart had just died. I believe.
I meant it wouldn't be the last.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I love the Harts. Are we at that match? The second match? Or are we?
No. So basically, in this match, it's not a clean sweep. Everyone gets eliminated, but the Ultimate Warrior. So this match is kind of just an Ultimate Warrior vehicle. And he beats Mr. Perfect by pinfall, which, if it was someone better than Ultimate Warrior, you'd be excited for that last little bit, but it's just like, he's going to run over Mr. Perfect, and Mr. Perfect can make people look really good, but there's a limit to how good you can make the Ultimate Warrior look.
Yeah, and I think, too, what's noticeable about this thing is you can tell Warrior does not like just the aspect of tagging with people. So when he'll, slap, and you see this big, jacked, energy-full guy who then has to crouch down beneath a rope and then stand for a while on the side and just do nothing.
When he keeps grabbing people by the head and psyching them up, because everything's the focus has to be on him, but the focus is not on him. Right. It's like Poochie, right? Like everyone's got to be asking, where's the Ultimate Warrior? Where's Destrucity?
Yeah, he should have access to the time machine.
But okay, listen, I think somebody has to come to his defense. He has that awesome makeup. He has the cool straps, these dangly things right below his shoulders. Yeah. He has that beautiful long hair. What's not to love?
Yeah,
he's got a great look.
He runs to the ring. There's that too.
Great look, great entrance. And, he's an interesting promo.
In interviews, he just does this.
There's one where he tells a joke. I think it might have been the pay-per-view before, where he's like, what's the difference between whoever he's wrestling and the Liberty Bell? One's cracked and the other's a ding-dong. It's like, why are you telling a joke now? Doesn't make sense.
If you watch it, it is easy to get caught up in the hoopla because he is a super charismatic dude. There was a reason he captured the hearts, minds, and souls of the nation for a while, and the world for that matter. There was really nothing like him. The guy who just run out, have really quick matches, and just just instantly whoop guys while he looked really cool and was covered in neon colors. And at that time, he was the guy who they had beat Hogan without cheating to win the world title a few months prior. So they really were strapping the rocket to him and hoping, because Hogan was, he took a few months off in 1990 after Warrior was a champion to film the classic Christopher Lloyd vehicle, Suburban Commando.
Yeah. Also has The Undertaker in it.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to say it also has Shelley Duvall too, but
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Other famous wrestler, Shelley Duvall.
yeah, all the greats.
She was more of a valet. Yeah,
Valet
but no, he did the job cleaning the ring. Hogan, you know, how many people can say that?
I think in the 90s,
thing
it was
about-
only him and I think Piper beat him clean at Starrcade
Jesus.
96, and that was it that whole decade. Goldberg in 98 too, but
Okay. But that's the thing about Ultimate Warrior is that, like, if he could have been less of a jerk to everybody, he could have gone so much farther. Like, imagine if, because he started out with, like, Sting early on in his career, right?
oh yeah,
Imagine if, like, Sting had taken the Ultimate Warrior path. You know, he could have been even bigger than he is, you know?
yeah.
I think.
And then but then poor Ric Flair would have had to work in the 80s with the Ultimate Warrior. If we're fully Freaky Friday, both of them.
I wouldn't trade a Sting for a Flair, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the Flair.
Flair for the gold. Yeah, and with Warrior around that time too, there's a famous story that it was, I believe, TV exec of like a local affiliate that carried WWF's son, who approached the Ultimate Warrior in an airport and for like an autograph. And Warrior just like turned around and like at like full rage, like barked and screamed at the kid. And so the kid ran to his dad, and the dad kind of admits and said, you know, you need to make this right. Like, you know, we run your programming, and this is your champion doing this. So, and the footage came out like when like A&E did a biography of the Warrior last year or 2 years ago, and you have the clip of the Warrior, like all the outtakes of him trying to make his apology, because even the Warrior makes his apology in character. And then he breaks character just to tell Vince, I can't believe you're making me do this. This is so stupid.
What a baby. Like,
he'll go
he's
back
the
to, like,
worst.
when one falls from grace and makes the choices of, God, sorry, I can't do this. I don't think I'm in the wrong here.
Like, he just doesn't get it, right? Like, you're a face. Like, you have to be nice to the kids. It's like one of the few things you have to do as a face, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so our next match, we got the Dream Team. This is Dusty Rhodes, Coco Beware, and the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, versus the $1 Million Team, with the $1 Million Man, Greg the Hammer Valentine, and the Honky Tonk Man, with managers Virgil, Brother Love, and Jimmy Hart. I guess Virgil's a valet.
Yeah.
Big thing about this match, of course, we find out early on who the mystery partner is. And it is
The Undertaker.
Yeah. I remember I was dating a girl in Los Angeles, and I was born in '86, and she was a fan too. She was one who was a fan growing up, and then like got into it again because of dating me. And we put it together one night that she was literally born the night that the Undertaker debuted. So she was born on the night of this Survivor Series. And,
Was her dad a wrestling fan? Did he hold it against her?
No. You'd think like that would be the more reason to cheer her, you know, for birth of the Undertaker, but also I guess birth of, you know, what happens later in the show. But yeah, so that was kind of a moment where it was like, oh yeah, he's been the Undertaker for as long as you've been part of this mortal coil.
Jesus.
So,
Yeah.
Anyway, Piper kind of sandbags him a bit. And, like, he sounded very Canadian. He's like, hey, buckaroo, check out the ham hocks on that hoser, or something like that, basically.
As all Scottish say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because, like, at the time, a lot of the underground wrestling magazines were suggesting, because this egg had been on TV for so long, and because the wrestler in WCW, Mean Mark Callis, had not been on TV forever, the rumor was, oh yeah, Mark Calloway is going to show up in WWF, and his character is going to be the Eggman, and he's going to hatch out of his egg. So if you can imagine how different the world of wrestling would be if that was the plan, and we would have had, you know, maybe he would have still been, you know, one of the WWF's longest reigning characters for, you know, 3 decades.
If he debuted breaking out of an egg.
Yeah. He's like, oh no, it's the Eggman. You know,
I was thinking, because it is a very successful surprise. It's one of the few surprises in wrestling that are actually good, especially like a substitution. But then, you know, if he had come out of that egg, I think that would have ruined it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. It's hard to come out of an egg and be a pop cultural icon. But
yeah, it would have been like, who's the guy who comes out with the big stormtrooper helmet that's all glittered up?
Shockmaster.
Yeah, it would have been like a Shockmaster. Imagine if Tugboat had come out of there and like just tripped over the egg.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Side note, you know, Tugboat, who we'll see later in the show, was almost the person prior to Sergeant Slaughter who they were going to have be the evil Iraqi sympathizer initially.
I think that would have been better.
Yeah, because the thing is, because the plan was they were still going to keep the name Tugboat, but they were going to call him Sheik Tugboat. Which would have been, so you can imagine like him, like, you know, having like a turban and a large, like, you know, Arabian sword for how, you know, I mean, to quote the great Garth Marenghi, I know writers who use subtext, and they're all hacks. So, so we almost had that, but instead we have here, and you see Undertaker comes out, and his manager at the time was Brother Love, who's a character who's an evil evangelical in the style of the Tammy Faye Bakers and Billy Grahams of the time, and it was like a few weeks later when he gets swapped out for Paul Bearer, who was, the Undertaker. And from that, it was because he was a manager named Percy Pringle, who in real life, his side job from wrestling was actually working in the mortuary arts.
Oh, nice.
So when they brought him the idea of, they said, hey, what do you know about being an evil mortician? And he said, you guys are not going to believe this. Maybe not those exact words, but just, sometimes the stars align to bring.
I just happen to be evil.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another big surprise here to me. I mean, maybe this was going on before, but what was going on with Greg the Hammer Valentine's hair? It looks like the Exxon Valdez crash was localized entirely on his head.
Oh, that was because to have more tag teams, and they wanted to have the Honky Tonk Man have a partner, and they wanted to give Greg Valentine a whole new look. So they made him like Honky Tonk Man, because Honky Tonk Man is a guy who's a knockoff of Elvis, who they didn't want anyone to say Elvis. Yeah. So they made Greg Hammer Valentine a knockoff Roy Orbison without outright saying it was Roy Orbison. So
not a good look for him.
Yep.
Okay, listen.
For him.
I'm not gonna lie, guys. I'm having the hardest time keeping all the track of all of these people. Are those Rhythm and Blues, like those two chubby dudes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine. They're Rhythm and Blues.
Yeah. That was something else. It's all the gimmicks for all of their characters. I know the big ones, right? I know The Undertaker, I know Hulk Hogan, and I know Ric Flair. All the big names I recognize. But then it's you have these things where it's fucking Tugboat.
Well, Tugboat's not a big name, but Greg the Hammer Valentine, that's kind of a big one, I think.
No, but I'm just saying, there's all of these other characters that had just as, these bizarre gimmicks. He's wearing, the little striped shirt and the Dixie Cup hat. These guys coming out in guitars and shit.
Toot.
How about the whole audience doing the toot along with him? The menacing.
Were they doing it? I don't understand. Tugboat seems like a guy, he showed up and then he turned heel basically a month later or something.
Well, he got injured, and then when he came back later, he turned heel because he was mad. He turned heel while tagging with the Bushwhackers because he was mad that Hulk Hogan didn't call him enough when he was in recovery. So then he joined Earthquake to become the evil Typhoon.
I thought he eliminated Hogan from the Rumble or something.
No, that was how Sid Justice became a bad guy.
Which I thought all of Hogan's friends, other than Beefcake, seemed to turn on him in the end.
Yep, and Beefcake just turns him on, but who wouldn't?
There you go. They're hanging and banging, brother. So Undertaker, he's kicking ass, but he eventually gets lured out of the ring.
How about that first? Not to keep interrupting you. That first tombstone that the Undertaker gives Coco Beware, you can tell he hasn't really done the move a whole lot.
Oh yeah,
and it's just right on the head to the back.
Oh yeah,
he does not stick the landing. And funny side note about that, the name Tombstone Piledriver actually predates the Undertaker. So when they gave it to him, they didn't name the move after him because he was an Undertaker. They gave him that name as a pun that, he's the Undertaker. He's going to give him the Tombstone Piledriver. That move actually goes back to the 70s and probably longer, but I think the earliest recorded mentioning of it is there's a 70s Japanese magazine with Andre the Giant doing that move, and they spell it the Tombstone Piledriver. So.
That's interesting because I was under the impression that Gorilla wasn't supposed to say the name of the move, and that he sort of was on autopilot and just kind of said it.
That's why I thought it was how does he know the name of the move? This guy just appeared.
Their non-pay-per-view shows were taped in advance, so they had footage of him wrestling.
Because he was Kane the Undertaker, they called him that on there, CA.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Something like that. Yeah, there was some changes between, but no, that is correct. But the tombstone did predate that, and WWF would do that with a lot of their characters, and to this very recently would still do it too. There was a Swiss wrestler who was with them called Antonio Cesaro, who's very Swiss, and so his finisher, because Switzerland is neutral, is he'd use a move called the neutralizer, which goes back to the 30s and 40s. The Gotch neutralizer. So, when it's hey, if we can make this a pun, let's do it. Why not? So,
my favorite part of this was that it comes down to Hitman versus Greg Valentine and Ted DiBiase, and I think that's the best wrestling in the whole the whole thing. I
Oh,
feel
by
like.
far,
Just
by
that-
far. I forgot like how good that sequence is at the very end too. I mean, like they're all great. Like, if you've only ever, for any listeners who may have only ever been a WWF fan, if you watch like 80s Greg Valentine NWA, like the dog collar match with Piper, or like Valentine's like Intercontinental Championship run, like he was, I still enjoy him in the 90s, but he was a much different type of cat.
Well, everyone became sucky when they came to WWF. Like the Bushwhackers are in this. They used to be the Sheep Herders. They were like this intense hardcore band, and they become this like these goofballs that lick each other.
Yeah, and they were goofing it all the way to the bank. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it worked. But yeah, I really love that last little bit of this match. It's probably like 4 or 5 minutes of him. He beats Greg Valentine, and that's him against $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, who I feel like you don't get a lot of opportunities to see him really wrestle. You know, I feel like it's mostly gimmick with him.
Yeah.
And he can go. You know, I thought they were really good together.
And it's interesting too because like after I watched it, I'm like, man, how come no one talks about how great the end of this match is? I mean, does it get lost with all the other Pyro and Ballyhoo on the card? But then I looked it up, and I found an interview with Brett from 2015 where he said, you know, he was so distraught over the recent death of his brother, and so you know, Brett still had to wrestle on the card, but as a compromise, he was allowed to have like this just like great scientific wrestling showcase with Ted DiBiase as a tribute to his brother.
Interesting.
And I watched the cut of it because the one that they have on the Peacock on the WWE Network. I don't know if that's the version that y'all watched. But what the one on that one restores to it is right after DiBiase curls up Brett and pins him. You see Brett just sit up and just like audibly.
Fuck.
Yeah, he goes fuck. I think that was cut out of the home video version that I watched for years because like I was like, whoa.
You don't hear him, but you can see him say it. Yeah, man, it's good. And I assumed it's just because like they were trying to, you know, he was going to be striking on his own. The new generation kicks off like fairly soon after. It's maybe a year or two after.
Years later, but before that, like 91, they really made him the strong singles guy. Probably one of the 3 best years any wrestler has ever had, only rivaled by Brett's 92 and Brett's 94. Just in terms of like week to week consistency against diverse opponents. Like, yeah, dude.
Yeah, he's so good in the ring at like making you care about him. Like, I knew he lost this match having seen this before, and I was just on the edge of my seat watching it. It's so good. And you can hear the crowds cheering for him. They're getting right behind him. It's so good to see. But ultimately, DiBiase reverses a crossbody into a pin and wins. He's a sole survivor.
Mm-hmm. What was your reaction to all this, Patrick?
Dude, the thing with you guys are talking about the $1 Million Man. I'm still stuck on the fucking $1 Million Man because for the longest time I thought he was like a manager. I never knew he wrestled.
Yeah,
because it wasn't like him.
You were watching, yeah, he was just a manager. Yeah,
yeah, he had like a babe with him like later on, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just the act with his like beautiful hair and these amazing suits with like the dollar signs and all of the glitter and shit. But yeah, that like watching them throw down, that was a lot of fun. I was actually showing my daughters part of this. Oh. Yeah, and it was like they were going ape over it. But it's kind of fun because it's like when you see it really well done, it's like a kid, they can like not realize that, you know, they're getting hit, but they're not hitting each other, right? I don't know. I don't have the eye for this that you guys do, but
no, it sounds like you do actually.
Well, you know, I'm good at making shit up as I go along. But no, it was I have to agree, it was like a pretty fun one to watch. And I mean, that's like I focus mostly on like the silly aspects of like the characterization and stuff. That's what really hooks me. But,
well, they have it in spades at this point in WWF. This is like the gimmick
era. As a great John Popper of Blues Traveler would say, and it's the hook that brings you back. He ran a militia. Anyway.
Well, moving on, we got match number 3. This is the Vipers, Jake the Snake Roberts, Jimmy the Murderer Snuka, and the Rockers,
Alleged.
Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels.
Alleged, but also actual.
Oh, is that a legend?
Alleged.
I thought. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He murdered her. Sorry, it's Jimmy the Manslaughterer Snuka, and the Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, versus the Visionaries, Rick Martel, the Warlord, Hercules, and Paul Roma. That's Power and Glory, those last two, with their manager Slick,
the Doctor of Style. Yeah, do you know why they're called the Visionaries?
Because Rick Martel blinded Jake the Snake
And do you know how he blinded Jake the Snake?
with his atomizer. What was it? Arrogance for men.
You know, now there's a fragrance that puts it all on the line. Arrogance. Whether it's a forehand, a backhand, every shot's a winner because women navrata love it. Arrogance for men will make you the number 1 seed. One shot and you'll be in the royal box. I don't love that.
Speaking of Rick Martel, I was looking at him coming out with the big button. I'm like, this has got to be Patrick's gimmick if he was a wrestler. I'm pretty sure I've seen you dress like this guy.
Oh yeah, Chaz, if you want, I can send you a set of buttons, my channel buttons, if you want.
I'd love them.
All right.
Yeah, I actually did have a shirt for a while. It was made in the 2010s, so it was not an officially licensed WWE product, but it was a purple shirt that had a blue circle that had the "Yes, I am a model" written on it. And so I'd wear it in public. It's one of those things where it's like, if wrestling fans knew it was a wrestling shirt, people who didn't watch, the classic era wrestling had no idea what it was. Some people would say, like, "Yes, I'm a model." So what does that mean? Are you a model? And I'd just go.
Then you'd pull out your arrogance spray.
Yeah, just immediately blind them. Yeah.
The thing I like about Rick Martel's gimmick is like that's not what a model looks like. Like a model doesn't look like that. They don't have their cologne in like a atomizer.
Yeah.
There's nothing about this guy that says model. Like when he'd be in his he'd be doing like a promo or whatever, he'd be dressed like a like a Eurotrash shitbag or whatever. It's like, okay, then you could see it. But in the ring, this like open jacket with the button and stuff.
Nah, he looked like a J.C. Penney model. I don't know. What do you have? Tim
Zellers.
Hortons model at Zellers.
Well, he is French Canadian, so I don't know if that's I know it's a touch contentious, Yeah. But I do what I liked about Rick Martel and Ted DiBiase with what they have in common both as like heel rich guys is they would be announced as being from different locations depending on what time of year it was. And they would always go back to that, so they would have seasonal residences. But
I didn't know that.
Boom. So.
So one time they're coming in from the Poconos, and another time it's
from the Alps.
That's great.
Alps, yeah, and
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a rich guy wrestler now? Is there like a
yes,
Ted DiBiase?
Who's doing the gimmick? He's actually the AEW champion. His name is MJF, and he just recently turned face because it was one of those things where he was just like this like rich like scumbag jerk, and then finally one of the guys who was about to feud with finally got to him as like his first friend. So he's still it's great because he's still doing the same like scumbag stuff, but he's just doing it to the other heels. So now that makes him the de facto face, and people love it. Like the big chant for him is "That's our scumbag." That's our scumbag.
Is he like a tech bro, or do they explain how he gets his money, or are they just like, he's old money?
He's old Long Island money.
Okay.
Nice.
So yeah, it's funny because initially when he was a heel for the first 3 years, he was like by far the most hated guy in the company, and he'd be hated everywhere except for Long Island, New York, which he would refer to as the greatest place on earth. So Long Island, like the 3 times a year they do shows in Long Island, he'd be cheered over the top and he'd boo all the good guys.
It's like when Bret Hart would come to Canada when he was a heel later.
It is exactly that, but with Long Island, which I don't know if anyone listening has ever been to Long Island, and if you have, my condolences. But yeah, it's such a I'm not the biggest Long Island fan. Like, really, it's a playful tease, but the way people think New Yorkers think about New Jersey, we really think about Long Island.
There you go. So anyway, any thoughts on this match? I have the results here.
I think a really underrated aspect of this, it doesn't get mentioned at all, but Shawn Michaels in particular, who later on to be a fantastic solo wrestler, the way that him is at this point a tag team guy, and when the guys he's in the ring with makes everything done to him look so devastating.
Yeah.
It really goes far to really make the heels look like this unbeatable force. In particular, where it's the one guy, Hercules, superplexes, where he lifts and slams Shawn off of one turnbuckle, and the other guy, Paul Roma, jumps off the other turnbuckle to go the other halfway across the ring to land on him. And
high-flying tandem offense. Nice.
Indeed. And I think it's because that was for a long time the only match in circulation, because the pay-per-views were on video, that people would see that repeated for years. And this is a thought I had watching this now. I wonder if part of that cherished memory is the fact that Shawn in particular makes that move look so cool in that particular spot, that he's able to be in just the perfect place for it and just a perfect devastation for it. So that stuck out for me. I also also think I love the.
If it had been Marty, he would have had a big smile on his face. It wouldn't have worked.
Oh yeah, he would have been, so high that his ears popped. And I do, also alleged murderer Marty Jannetty.
I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, and that one, he confessed it on Facebook. Or he said a story on Facebook of that and hiding a body to the point where like a police officer actually came to his home because they're like, hang on, did you just publicly confess to an unsolved murder? And then Marty said, oh no, I was just saying that because I'm a wrestler and it's for a story and it's for Facebook. And I thought that, not thinking, no, you're retired and not like, you're not contracted to a wrestling company. How did you, who was it for, but
I'm gonna have to look into this more.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Also, Warlord, who's made to look like a beast. I just love that he has that little Warlord wand with W on it, and the black
The stick. I'm sorry.
He looks like $1 million. He looks
Here's the
great.
thing. No, I'm sorry, but like when you have these dudes that are like huge, right? Like they are roided up. They're massive. They could be like bodybuilders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you give them these like little props. These like little impotent props that they like, walk around with, like this golden rod with a little W on it. Why?
I think
Well,
he
he's
looks
a
great.
warlord.
And he looks great in the ring. Like he's like in a ring where everyone's big. Well, I mean, not the Rockers, but he's big. Like he's huge. He's really big. He's intimidating.
What's interesting too is he's also deceptively very young there. Like Warlord is, I want to say like 20 or 22.
Jesus.
So it
looks like he's 40.
He does. And so like 20 years later, he like a smaller promotion like brought him in to do like a one spot just to get kicked back in the ring for like a nostalgia night sort of match. And so everyone was like, how does he still look exactly the same? How is he still at the same speed, the same size, the same cardiovascular, conditioning? And it's like, oh, it's because he was just super young then and had just kind of always looked like this.
Oh my God. All right. Well, we got to move on. So this one is a clean sweep for the heels, but Jake gets to stay strong doing the fight for his life thing, and he doesn't have to job clean. He gets a count out. So they're keeping Jake strong in this match. Then match 4, we've got the Hulkamaniacs, which is Hogan, Bossman, Tugboat, Toot Toot, and Jim Duggan versus the Natural Disasters.
Good sir.
What?
Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Oh, sorry. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Sorry.
He's carrying that 2x4 for our, soldiers fighting overseas.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Patrick? You must have liked those yellow ribbons tied around it.
The yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. I love that. Dude, that's like the weird gimmicks that like, why is it Hacksaw Jim Duggan is still, we'll call him a household name for lack of a better term, but Tugboat is forgotten.
I think
Like
it's that Hacksaw came by his gimmick sort of more naturally. Like his gimmick seems like it's just all these things that sort of coalesced around him. It's like saying ho, looking weird, never jobbing clean.
Well, he was also a star football player, I want to say too. Like not
that probably helped too.
Might have been the CFL. Was he in?
That's probably how he came in. A lot of them were in the CFL. One of the Rough Riders teams, probably. I think it was like 4. And then he's got the 2x4. I don't know where that came from, but so he's got this whole like sort of naturally formed gimmick around him, and people love him.
Yeah, and I think and just the long lasting part of it, comparable to the freshness of Big Red. And it's interesting too how he came back as like his first run in, because he won the very first Royal Rumble in '88, and prior to that, when he was in like Mid South, he was still like the lovable guy, but he was a taken very seriously kind of competitor. And then famously him and Iron Sheik, at a time when the good guys were not allowed to travel with the bad guys to maintain the illusion of good guys versus bad guys, they were carpooling together and got pulled over by cops and busted for drugs.
Yeah.
And wound up being covered on the news, so he was let go from WWF. And then when he came back, Vince is like, okay, we're gonna make you a goofball. And so then he just kind of just went veering totally into the wacky Jim Duggan sort of guy.
Well, you don't break kayfabe, I guess, in the in the 80s.
I guess, listen, all I want in the end is I just want justice for Tugboat, and I want his position elevated to where I think is more appropriate.
Are we going to reform the TAS, the Tugboat Appreciation Society?
Yeah.
It's us right now.
This is the Tugcast from now on. Like all future episodes. We're going to watch different.
I think there already is a Pornhub Tugcast, so we'll need something different.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be the Tuggers.
There we go. So
we got the tug jobs.
Quick sidebar. So the Undertaker just announced this week he's going to start a new podcast, and they're not calling it Dead Man Talking. Like that's a perfect name. It's right there. Why would you not go with that? So. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay, so versus the Natural Disasters, Earthquake aka Canadian Earthquake, Dino Bravo, Haku, and the Barbarian, with managers Jimmy Hart and Bobby Heenan. Now, when I saw this with my buddy Nick, when we rented this and watched it, I was on Team Hulkamaniacs, but he was actually right. I think the Natural Disasters, that's the better team here. Also, it starts with an interview. They're shooting a promo with Hogan, and you better get your sunglasses on, brother, because that interview is in Technicolor. And I also noticed that Hogan is like stealing everyone's catchphrases and like saying them before them. So it's like he says something to Hacksaw, and he goes, "Here you go, tough guy."
Yeah, and the boss man's like, you hear about Law and Order.
And at first I was like, "Oh, he's putting them over." Then I'm like, "No, he's making sure they don't go over him. He's keeping them in their place."
Yeah, because people don't realize like how close to popularity Hulk Hogan and Tugboat were at that point.
There you go. Tugboat. It was going to be Tugomania.
People at that point, people think at the point Hulk Hogan was like the number one star in the company, and Tugboat was number two. But that's just history. It was 1 and 1A more than any. No, I'm kidding completely.
Well, it's the history's written by the victors, right? So
yeah, and not by the tugboats, unless they're the Sheiks, which didn't happen in this timeline.
I mean, Hulk. If you watch this, I mean, I don't know. There's probably like a million examples of this, but Hulk Hogan being like one of the greatest showmen of all time, like the fact that he is like stepping on people's lines, like taking their catchphrases to like kind of assert his dominance or whatever, but like in the ring, out of the ring, it's just like he is really good at what he does.
He's got it. Yeah,
he was the tentpole flagship for a reason. I think that's kind of why it's a little more frustrating than someone else having to do, because it's like, you don't need to steal their stuff. You're Hulk Hogan,
He's such a heel. Like Hogan is a heel. Like he's a face, but he's booked like a heel. Like in this one, he pulls out Earthquake, at the end and gets Tugboat counted out. It's like that's his buddy, and then so he can win on his own, and then hot dog in the ring for 20 minutes. Ridiculous. He do that, which people were doing just as much as they were doing the toot toot for He's money. That's it. He's money.
Yeah, he's Tug Money. That would have been the hip hop thing had the character been rechristened in the later 90s. We missed out on rapping. No, I say that actually because prior to being in the WWF, that particular character, Tugboat, Fred Ottman's his real name. His character briefly was a breakdancer.
No way.
It was, and he was actually good at smooth pop and locking for like a really brief time in Texas.
Oh my god!
You can tell it's like the hip hop thing comes on, the audience is ready for him to be like, oh, here comes a funny big guy trying to dance, and the audience like, oh wait, he's like actually good. Like it's just he does like the whole moving with the arm sort of thing, and so. I wonder if that would have been if Vince probably saw that as like, nah, your dancing's too good. No one will like it.
I wonder if it had been a few years later if they could have teamed him up with like Mo and Mabel or something.
Oh, if only. Yeah. Or I think he could have, the breakdancing was good enough to fit in with any era hip-hopper. Like, you imagine him and Rikishi getting down, just the tons of fun that they would have been in the ring. But I will say, like, yeah, this is around the time, like, Big Boss Man, he was, like, really slimming down at that point, too, and becoming, like, a big guy. So I think it's cool seeing his speed, and I love the part when he gets in the ring.
He looks great.
And when he punches Earthquake a bunch of small times in the stomach, like, that which would be police brutality now. But then it was like, yeah, we're going to cheer him beating up Earthquake. Big John Tenta. It's funny, like he's someone too where through the years later the gimmicks, because then he went to WCW and they called him Avalanche because it gets close enough to an earthquake, so people would like know what it is. And then he was rechristened the Shark, so he was a wrestling shark.
He got his tattoo redone.
He had his tattoo changed to be a shark on his arm.
Oh my god!
And then after that, he was just a Big John Tenta because his gimmick was he was the guy who didn't need gimmicks to get revenge on all the heels who made him have a gimmick to fit in. It was kind of meta. And then he went back to WWF, and they were worried people were going to cheer for him or remember him as Earthquake. So they put like this weird, completely obstructive kind of gimp-looking mask over him that made his head look deformed, and they put a South Park T-shirt on him. And his name was Golga of a group called the Oddities, who were managed by the Insane Clown Posse. And then he would come out and like I see people be rapping, and he'd be like waving his Cartman doll in the background to him. It's amazing we survived the 90s, gentlemen.
But before all this, he was in Japan. He was a sumo wrestler.
Yeah, he's a legitimate champion sumo wrestler too.
No way.
Yeah. He's also someone who's deceptively young, because I think he's 26 in that match.
Yeah. So. I guess if you're like big and hairy, like that puts some years on you.
It does.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think also being a wrestler adds a few years.
I also love how his music is just the sound of the ground shaking.
And apparently he's like legendarily a nice guy.
Oh,
like he took care of everyone in the ring. No one has a bad thing to say about him.
Yeah, and he wrote the foreword on the WrestleCrap book, the book about the worst gimmicks in wrestling history, and really added a level of humanity to it. Where I remember part of the lines was he said, people asked, "Hey, why would you paint your face and dress up like a shark to get on television?" And he said, "Because if I didn't, someone else would, and it wouldn't change my life at all." So it's like, and it's also a thing too where, just getting kind of the greater point of this, who's to say what catches on and what doesn't? Like, if you look at the first match, for the first time seeing it live, Undertaker has that character pretty much down. And who's to say why that captured the imagination of people and Tugboat didn't have the same, lingering.
Well, if he had only entered from an egg, he would have gone nowhere. So it was like they could have completely ruined it right away.
Yeah. But what if Tugboat did and he was Eggboat?
There you go. That might have worked.
Tugboat could have done an Undertaker style thing and just gone like this.
Yeah, just giving him the tug. Oh, yeah. The Tugboat.
He could have had a Beatles theme, and he could have been like the walrus coming out of the egg.
Yeah.
And he could have formed his tag team.
Boom. If only. These ideas of better things to come out of eggs are all hindsight. Over easy, as they say.
So I'm going to try to keep us moving along. So Hogan, he wins. We get a Mean Gene interview with the Macho King. He calls everybody a turkey, including the Ultimate Warrior, who he calls the Ultimate Turkey, and also the Ultimate Chicken and the Ultimate Turkey again.
Yeah, Chaz, hold on real quick, because I know you got this info. When did he go from Macho Man to Macho King?
It was in 1989, after he lost the world title to Hulk Hogan. The WWF would do annual, like a house shows, King of the Ring tournaments. It later became a pay-per-view in the 90s. But back then they had a thing where whoever won would be considered the king of wrestling for a year. I believe that the timeline is, I'm probably getting this confused because Harley Race won it, and then Haku, who we saw in the match, won it from him. At some point, Jim Duggan wins it, and then Savage won it from Jim Duggan. So then he became, and because then they were trying to totally separate him from, for lack of a better term, stink of the Macho Man who lost to Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 5. So he dumped Miss Elizabeth. People still love Miss Elizabeth. He got sensational Queen Sherry to be his queen, as he was the Macho King. And there is a whole segment where all the heels gather in the ring for his coronation. And his real life brother, Lanny Papa, who went under the name The Genius, I believe, he reads a poem celebrating declaring long live the Macho King. So what I find noteworthy about this, and people, because it's been speculated online, where there's no definitive answer why Randy Savage didn't have a match on this card. The overwhelming thought, and again, there's no 100% proof of this, but the thought is that if he were to be in a match, he would at some point have to lose because of the whole faces versus heels at the end of the night. And they wanted to still keep a strong contender lurking in the shadows to fight the Ultimate Warrior. So they wanted them to not touch on television so that when they would have house shows, it would be, which for those who don't know who are listening, house shows are the non-televised touring wrestling events. They could still have Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Savage as an event you had to pay to see live. So, but what I wanted to bring up, and why it's kind of significant about this Randy Savage promo, is the ongoing theory that the ripple effect of him not having a match on this card is it was this pay-per-view event that the wrestling arcade game WrestleFest was based on. And that's why Randy Savage is conspicuous by his absence from that game, because the roster in that arcade game is all people who had matches at that Survivor Series.
Huh. Interesting. So he was left out of this video game, and
because who were putting the game together weren't big fans of wrestling, so they just saw who was in the matches as the marquee guys, and they assumed, okay, these are the guys going forward who are going to be in it. So that's why.
Do you think that really hurt him though? Because he still had a few good years as the Macho King. I thought Macho King was a pretty good gimmick.
I don't think it hurt him not being in the video game. I think if anything, it hurt the game.
Oh yeah,
just by not having Randy Savage in there. And something looking back, it's like Bret Hart was a tag team guy at the time, and the only tag teams in that game were Smash and Crush and the Road Warriors, because you need guys with face paint to sell your arcade game. It's a rule of 1990.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe everyone else, Sergeant Slaughter. I think it's also why randomly Sergeant Slaughter's Cobra Clutch finisher in that game isn't the actual Cobra Clutch. It's him giving someone a noogie because of some sort of thing that happens in his match later. So, but yeah, the ripple effect of Savage not having a match is him not in the arcade game. So
that's a shame. Also, he's dressed like he's like a quantum candy cane, and the stripes are going in every direction.
Yep,
it's a lot to look at.
Yeah, after that match, now whenever I shut my eyes, that's the pattern I see.
Those glasses are beautiful.
Yeah, and what is interesting too is like there's speculation that that he was injured, but he literally wrestled the day before and the day after this pay-per-view. So definitely not that he didn't have.
I feel like he got a bad hand in WWF over and over again. It felt like even like was it WrestleMania 9? That's the one in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like they have him as an announcer, and the reason is like, oh, they thought he was too old to draw, and it's like, no, he was a big name until the day he died, basically.
Yeah, and he was still good in the ring. Like, I mean, if you look at his WCW run, like, at that point when, Hogan's showing some signs of aging, Flair's showing some signs of aging, but you look at like, Randy Savage's feud with Diamond Dallas Page in '97, and that's as good as any feud you're seeing on, American wrestling television.
Dude, Diamond Dallas Page. I forgot about DDP.
Oh, dude, you should do his yoga. Great.
What do you do?
Feel the bang. Yeah. Star of the 2000 film Ready to Rumble with David Arquette, who, side note, whose father voiced Jimmy Snuka in the 1980s rock and wrestling cartoon. So
there you go.
Flipping full circle. But yeah, so Randy Savage, and it's also kind of the raw deal in WCW for him as well, because even pre-NWO, WCW's business was rebuilt from their house shows for the 1995 Ric Flair Randy Savage feud. So for these live events that Hulk Hogan wasn't even on, people wanted to see Flair versus Savage. And then it is because of there's a terrible, God rest the dead, but there's a terrible Roddy Piper Hulk Hogan steel cage match from Halloween Havoc 1997. The worst part of it, on top of the fact that they're brawling outside the ring in a cage match, is the fact that the big climactic ending was Randy Savage climbing to the top of a 15, 20 foot high steel cage to jump off it to do an axe handle, which is hitting. The idea is Hogan's going to hold Roddy Piper and he's going to hit him with both his arms. The positioning is wrong and it looks bad. And Savage lands. You could just see like his knees explode as he lands on the mat. And then he came back way too soon as a surprise at Starrcade '97, 2 months later. Because when your knees explode, you need more than a 2-month recovery thing.
Yeah.
He was just never the same in the ring after that. So still a great promo, but it's Hogan ruins everything, especially with.
Did he shoot on Hogan about that in his rap album?
That didn't get mentioned, but Be a Man with Randy Savage, that album would be much more fondly remembered if it was performed by anyone who wasn't Macho Man Randy Savage, because the rapping on it is more than adequate. Like you can tell I wrote a piece on it for Complex Magazine a few years back. I did an oral history with a bunch of people who worked with him on it, and yeah, he like legitimately was studying all the hip hop at the time and practicing different flows because he didn't want it to sound bad. And like the flows are there. He's doing like double time, triple time, like really amazing breath control. But it's like, it's all done in his Slim Jim voice, but that's how it sounds, yeah. And so it's like, it's hard to get past the fact that it's Randy Savage rapping. So.
But he is a phenomenal artist, just broadly, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like his craft in the ring is just so good. His character's so good.
In terms of
he
all
lives
around,
it too.
In terms of all around in every corner of the wrestling world, I think it'd be hard pressed to not put him among the top 5 to like week to week performance to ever do it. Yeah, and he's also the only guy who ever like genuinely retired because he didn't felt he had it anymore. His last match was in December 2004, and he's barely in it because he just felt it was a pay-per-view, and he felt that he couldn't like perform at the level that he could and didn't want to give people a bad last image of him. So he's not there for the match until the last 2 minutes where he comes in, does the elbow drop, and it was like to give him a shot at a world title, and then we just don't see him again. So he also was diagnosed OCD, but he never took the proper. This is before a lot of like OCD, especially in the entertainment world, was taken seriously. So he always felt he had to power through things, and a lot of times it went haywire and really wrecked his life in a lot of ways. So he was on one hand an incredible perfectionist, but it also made him someone and as someone with diagnosed OCD, when it's untreated or when you can have potential to spiral and become incredibly paranoid, to become incredibly, inadvertently feeling like things are out of your control, and you try to get that control and you think people are out to get you. And you get like caught up in like what essentially is superstition. Like famously, he had a irrational hatred for luggage on wheels because he had always carried his luggage.
Yeah.
So he never like acted on it, but whenever someone would like try to give him like a luggage with wheels on it, he would become incredibly angry and just like really talk about how much he hated the idea of luggage with wheels. And it's like, yeah, okay, man. Like, but mean, he's also known as like one of the all-time great guys with fans. Like even like one time, famously, he was this is I guess like showing the difference between a guy like him and a guy like the Warrior. He was checking in late, like really late to a hotel. He had a long day, and like the kid had come up behind him in line and had kind of like pulled on like his thing to talk to him after like his reservation wasn't there. The kid like pulled on his thing, and so he turned around, and he yelled at the kid, thinking it was like someone being an asshole, not a child. So the kid ran away crying, and then Savage famously dropped everything and ran after the kid, and he profusely apologized to the child and apologized to the kid's dad, and then stayed up even after a long night of wrestling and having issues with like getting into a hotel, and just spent like a long time talking and hanging out with this kid and his father just because he felt so bad and wanted to make sure the kid didn't have a bad impression of him and did what he could to make it right. So
I'm shaking my head, but I'm shaking my head at Ultimate Warrior because that's how it's done,
Yeah.
Come here, kid. Get back here. I didn't even scare you.
Gotta apologize. I acted irrationally, and that's not how one should go through life.
No,
All right.
whole night is gonna be with me, brother.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we spent too much time on Macho Man for how much he's in this pay-per-view. So
yeah,
we'll save that for a future episode.
Right.
So next we have match 4, The Alliance. This is Nikolai Volkov, Tito, the Ariba Man, Santana, and the Bushwhackers, Luke and Bush, versus the Mercenaries, Sergeant Slaughter, Boris Zukov, Sato and Tanaka. They're the Oriental Express, and they've got managers General Adnan and Mr. Fuji.
So General Adnan, real life childhood and teenage friend of Saddam Hussein. So when they would bring him into WWF television during the time of the Gulf War, and so they brought him in, and then they used that because he was, like an actual, like a Iraqi citizen. And so some people would speculate, these photoshopped photos of him and Saddam Hussein, but it was good Photoshop. And it's like, no, those are actual photos of them. So he would say, like, before the matches, like, I contacted Saddam for guidance on what to do in this match.
So there's two big heel face turns / face heel turns. Nikolai Volkov, he was a Red Scare guy. He's recently turned face because America has a new enemy, their old friend, Saddam Hussein. And at the same time, Sergeant Slaughter is newly turned heel, and he shoots on the troops as he comes down to the ring. And I couldn't hear much above the drum in his song, but mostly just puke and maggot is what I could hear.
Yeah. Well, I was actually surprised by this. I've never seen this before. I was taken aback when he's like, "Oh, I was eating turkey and having pumpkin pie with Saddam in Iraq, and there wasn't no sand in that pie."
While you soldiers on the Armed Forces Network are eating hot turkey sandwiches full of sand. Healing it up on the soldiers.
And I'll tell you what's disgraceful. Disgraceful is saluting the American flag.
It's like, that's crazy to me as a Canadian, because you think about American wrestling and like usually you don't shoot on the troops. Like, that's some major heat.
It's interesting because they wanted to cash in on that, and with Sergeant Slaughter, who for a decade prior to that, and he is someone who everyone knows him most as Sergeant Slaughter, and rightfully so, because it's one of the most iconic wrestling characters. But before he was the evil or good drill instructor Sergeant Slaughter, he had a very interesting string of gimmicks. He initially was a pretty boy model in the 70s wrestler. And then he was like
those years are way behind him at this point.
and then after that, he was a tough, like a street, like thug sort of guy, like like Sharks and Jets kind of, street gang sort of guy.
Nice.
And then he was a British cyborg. I can't remember the name. It was like something Mach 2 was the last.
What
part.
like territory was he in?
Then I think it was him in the South, and he was managed then by Lord Alfred Hayes, who brought him in as like his evil.
Okay.
A Mach 2, and so they covered his face, and he was just like this evil British robot. And then after that, he came up with the idea of him being Sergeant Slaughter. Yeah, and it's rumored, and there's differing reports depending on who you talk to about it, that him having like the army sound and like the trumpet, or the army sound, the army song, one of the army songs and the trumpet playing was the very first time a wrestler had used theme music, because he would enter in Madison Square Garden. He'd say, "Put this record on," and then they would play it and walk to the ring, and to be like, oh, people would stand at attention for the Sergeant Slaughter. And He's 36 there. I think he's about 37. He might be 37. And it's interesting because like back in like the early 80s, he was beloved.
He's 37 here?
Yeah.
He looks like he's like 57.
He looks so old.
He was about to become the oldest WWF champion until Vince McMahon won it. So he looks much older, but like in the 80s, like 10 years prior, he had like the famous boot camp match with Pat Patterson. It's one of the greatest matches of all time, one of the bloodiest matches you'll ever see too. And it holds up really well. Yeah, that's Sarge. Then he left WWF, even though he's one of the top beloved guys, because Hasbro wanted to make a G.I. Joe who was a real life person. And Vince said, no, we have this toy deal with LJN. They can't have them making toys of you. And he said up to his wife, I don't know what to do. And his wife said, look, you can always be a wrestler. There'll always be wrestling. How many times do you have a chance to be a G.I. Joe? So he left into G.I. Joe for a few years and was the very first real life person who was a G.I. Joe. And those of us, the 80s who remember the G.I. Joe cartoon, he would sometimes do the intro to those things. And he was later a voice in the G.I. Joe movie as himself.
I remember him in the movie.
Yeah.
It was like you're going to go home in an itty bitty ditty bag.
Yep. Yeah. Slaughter's Marauders. I have a picture of me with Sergeant Slaughter and Iron Sheik on my wall, and next to it I have the mail-away G.I. Joe Sergeant Slaughter, because initially when they brought out the Sergeant Slaughter G.I. Joe toy, you couldn't buy them in stores. You had to like cut out a certain amount of like UPCs to mail it in, and they mailed it for you. And they sold you on that saying, Sergeant Slaughter can't be bought. Sergeant Slaughter has to be earned. Brilliant marketing. So, yeah, and then he decided, I'm going to side with Saddam and come back because they needed a top guy.
Do you think that was Vince punishing him for like leaving?
Maybe. I don't know. But it was, it's also hard to say he punished a guy. And I'll definitely think this is one of the most petty people who's ever existed. But it's hard to say someone was being punished when you're also making him the perpetual main event and giving him the big payoff that anyone in your company not named Hulk is going to be getting that year.
That's true. But they're kind of poisoning his gimmick, which obviously he was like making money on outside of the ring.
True, but it also, he was making money outside the ring, but also who knows how long the life of especially then, the career of a big time on television wrestler is going to be. So if you're going to have the end of your wrestling career be something, let it be at the very top of the card.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Saddam Hussein. So
yeah.
That one, I can see the argument for it being a punishment, definitely. But it's also a tough one to call. Because the thing is also, if you're going to have someone headline your WrestleMania, your biggest show of the year, like people knew the name Sergeant Slaughter. Like,
that's a big payday too.
Yeah.
So
that's a big draw. So
yeah, and he wrestles like Hogan and Warrior and stuff. So it's like I guess that is like top of the card.
He cleans up this match.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, just boom. Yeah.
He does. Who's he eliminate? Volkov, both the Bushwhackers, and then it seems like he's going to eliminate Tito Santana, but he ends up losing by disqualification. I didn't quite catch what he did there.
Oh, because the referee being shoved in, I think the ref then saw the flag being used on Tito, who they also make look amazing in the match, like when he eliminates like Boris Zukov immediately.
I was under the impression Tito, even though like I feel like most people don't really think of him fondly that much, that he was actually a big draw, like with like the Latin community.
Well, I think like a lot of people do think of him fondly. It's just like the era that like certain eras of fans, like for a lot of millennials, they only saw him like in the 90s as the guy who would be the person you'd beat to make your way up the card, and then later Matador, and then later after WWF, he had his own startup company called the AWF. That was like in syndicated that picked up all the guys who weren't hired by WWF or WCW, and they had a whole round system. It aired locally here on our WB network. It's a peculiar little run.
Like amongst our generation of wrestling watchers, I feel like he's not highly regarded.
Right, but if you go like to the Gen X, the Gen like right before us, he was a huge star in the 80s. He's kind of the guy who put the Intercontinental belt on the map. Him and Don Morocco.
Interesting.
Super nice guy. I had a chance to meet him a few years ago. I performed because there was a wrestling documentary called 350 Days back in 2018 that had its world premiere in New York. And the gentleman who produced it and put it together knew me as a freestyle rapper from the freestyle circuit. So I show him to cover the event as press, and he says, "Hey, do you want to do a freestyle about the documentary?" And I said, if you want me to, I'm happy to do it. If not, I totally understand if we're running short on time. But if you want me to do it, anything, I'm happy to do it. So it gets to it. And it's about to be this like national like Fathom events like shown in theaters across the country thing. And like in the house that night is like JJ Dillon of the Four Horsemen, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Tito Santana, some of the wrestlers from Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, some wrestlers from ECW, and like there's wrestlers like in the California premiere. And so this thing's being simulcast. And so I'm thinking like, and Minnesotan Bob Backlund is there, who also has my birthday. And so then like before it's getting like right before showtime, and he says, And now, as a special treat, flying in from Minnesota, freestyle rapper and wrestling historian Chaz Kangas is going to do the official 350 days freestyle rap. So I come down and I dash down like Ultimate Warrior style because I'm seated in the way back, not thinking this is going to happen. So I run down, I grab the mic. The crowd's completely silent, and the first thing I hear is someone just yell, "Just get it over with!" And but like, I have a really strong background in freestyle rapping. For those who may not know, my job through NYU was on the battle rap circuit. That's how I made my money through then. I rapped in the first Childish Gambino album. I've a pretty accomplished rap career. So and freestyling is something I have as a particular gift for. So, but I also know wrestling fans don't want to see non-wrestling shit. So I kept it a very small 4-bar freestyle. I kept it deliberately very short, and it went really well. And then afterwards, there's a lot of people clapping and being like, "Oh, that actually wasn't terrible," because a lot of wrestling media outside the realm of wrestling coverage is terrible. So I actually got a really nice applause, and you're also happy that it was super quick too. And long way to the well, but I was making my way back to my seat. Tito Santana leans over and he says, and I say exactly like this. He goes, "That was very good, arriba," and does the first. So for the wrestling fan inside me, I'm just like, yeah,
there you go.
The cosign from Tito, that makes my night. But yeah, Tito's also the man. I believe he held the record for wrestling. No, because Hogan was also on the first 9 WrestleManias, but Tito was also on the first 9 WrestleManias. I think Tito was in the very first WrestleMania match ever on the first WrestleMania card, I want to say too. So he's someone who's a lot of footnotes, but also the 90s fans may remember him at a different level of respect than the.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that people think badly of him. I just think people probably don't think as highly of him because he's sort of more almost more of a territories guy or something, Seems like he's kind of from before that generation, but he sells a lot of merch, as I understand it, or he did.
And his book is actually, from what I hear, really good. I purchased it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's called "Don't Call Me Chico," which because he was Patrick can do this impression better. Jesse Ventura, who he was friends with, would want to make sure as the heel bad guy commentator, he'd always refer to him as Chico Santana. And Tito credits that as being, getting him enough attention on it or something that the fans be like, "Oh, if this guy hates him, then I must love him." So really helping establish that.
All right. Well,
Patrick, you want to give us there goes Chico Santana?
No, I can't. Oh, no, I can't get into it. Okay. I got to do warm-ups. It's ridiculous.
Should have warmed up in the bathroom.
You didn't watch Abraxas before we started filming this?
Speaking of warming up, the egg has been warming up, and it's ready to hatch. Mean Gene has his working boots on. He introduces the egg. Is it a dinosaur? Balloons? Playmate of the month? Big cheers. It hatches. Boo! What is it?
It's a gobbledygooker.
It's some cretin in a turkey suit.
Am I allowed to say that? Gobbledygooker? Is that? Are we gonna have to bleep that?
We'll bleep out the second part.
No, you can say it's not a reference to what you're referring to. It's a different point of origin.
All right.
You're not going to get canceled for saying, that name.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna
It's not like a Vietnam gimmick or something.
Yeah, my dad used to wake up at night screaming about the gobbledygookers.
It's actually Hector Guerrero, which I think is that
brother
Eddie Guerrero's uncle?
Brother. He's Eddie's brother.
His brother.
Yeah,
okay.
The brothers are Eddie, Mondo, Hector, and Chavo Sr. And then Chavo Jr. is the son of Chavo Sr., who's later wrestled for WWE once Chavo Jr. was there as Chavo Classic.
Okay.
But because I think there's only a 4-year difference between Eddie and Chavo that they would call him his nephew, but they would tag team together because they were very close. Eddie Guerrero, one of the all-time greatest. Chavo Guerrero, also exceptional, who probably would also be remembered more fondly if he wasn't the nephew of a generational talent like Eddie Guerrero. But all the Guerreros are great. The band The Mountain Goats has a song, "The Legend of Chavo Guerrero," that kind of details how at one point he was probably the biggest star in the Southwest Territory, and how famously there was a battle royal where it was always a huge draw where you get 20 guys in the ring and you had to throw everyone over the top rope. And there was 18 other guys. There was Chavo Guerrero Sr. and there was Andre the Giant. And Andre the Giant did not lose battle royals. And so Andre was super beloved, but also, Chavo was super beloved. So the battle royal, it ultimately comes down to Andre and Chavo, and the crowd is split, not knowing who's going to happen, who's going to win. And they decide instead of fighting each other at the end of it, they embrace, they hug, they shake hands, they declare themselves both the winners, and they leave together peacefully under the top rope so no one gets eliminated. So, yeah.
It'd been funny if Andre healed out on him and kind of pushed him over the top as they were getting out.
Yeah. Whoa! Yeah.
So my question is, do you think Hector was in there all night, or do you think right before it hatched they kind of snuck him out and slipped him in?
I don't know if he was in the egg all night. I do notice because of that giant platform, so I wonder if he maybe had a more roomy space beneath it. And then
I assume the whole table is he could be in there, but I was wondering, it's maybe right before, did they bring him out in a blanket and kind of usher him in, maybe during a match or something, or did he have to sit in there all night in a turkey suit?
Yeah. Or maybe he came out dressed as a camera guy or a personnel who wasn't on camera and then snuck under there. That could very well be. Wrestlers were no stranger at that point to hiding beneath rings for entire shows where people were let into it. And so, it wouldn't be too beyond the pale to just be under there for 4 or 5 hours under a ring before coming out in that small realm of
That's kind of how I imagined it and how I want it. That's how it's going to remain in my mind. Just him hanging out, mask off, but still in the whole get up.
Yeah, all the feathers and everything, and
just waiting,
smoking cigarettes.
Yep. Yeah. Now I just imagine with the mask on and he's smoking through one of the eye holes and maneuvering up through that.
My favorite part of this whole ordeal is aside from Mean Gene Okerlund being, I don't know, having to embarrass himself by...
He's a pro. Mean Gene.
Even by wrestling standards, embarrass himself. Let's really think now.
I think there was Roddy Piper is he tries to do a cartwheel. He's he's a little bottom heavy. That wasn't going to happen. But my favorite part is, I think it's Roddy Piper, and I don't know if Gorilla Monsoon said this, but they were "Oh boy, he's really won the crowd over. The kids love it." They're not showing anybody in the crowd.
Yeah. Even production heavy quality, they can't drown out just the amount of booze this segment's dying such a painful death on.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, where it's on top of it being just and the thing is, it's genuinely impressive what Guerrero does in that suit there. He's an agile guy when you factor what he does, there. It is interesting. And I don't know if maybe the Gooker had some legs to it. There is an image of him that appears at the end of Super Tape Volume 3, the next Coliseum video release that happened after that. So maybe they thought he'd be a mascot ambassador for, if not just Survivor Series, for the WWF as a whole. And there's a bonus. I don't know if it was on the copy you watched. It's not on the network, but I remember from watching this tape as a kid. At the end of it, you see just the Bushwhackers hanging out with the gobbledygooker, and they're hugging each other and saying how much they like each other. And the Gooker kisses them with his little beak.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And he sounds a little like one of the Putty Patrollers from Power Rangers. So the kids love gobbledygook.
There you go. Well,
it's just I wonder if what it was going backstage, having to walk up to Vince McMahon and having the conversation where it's okay, what went wrong?
It's also during the piss break match too, right? It's that sort of dead part of the card too. So
yeah, the popcorn as it is. Patrick, were you aware this is a thing that happened on this show prior to this? Were you aware of the lore of the gobbledygooker at all?
No.
Okay.
Kyle just said there's some egg, and they were just talking about the egg,
right?
And it went wrong.
Okay. All right. And otherwise, were you aware prior to the first time you watched it, growing up, what the egg was prior to, or was this one of the old wrestling shows you watched and you had no idea what the egg would be?
Yeah, this would have just been one we rented, and we were kind of laughing at all the gimmicks that were different and stuff. And I do remember that just being bullshit.
Okay. So I bring that up just to make the point that, and we recognize it as bullshit. And I was the same way that I watch it too, because I remember for me, it was one of the tapes that I couldn't find to rent, so I had to buy it from a chain we had in Minneapolis called Chinders that would sell newspapers, baseball cards, and old VHS tapes. So when I first watched it, I wasn't prepped for it too, and I was just looking at it being oh, so is it a turkey wrestler now? Is he going to be a wrestler? Is he in the match? And
they got Red Rooster, so
right, yeah. So and that's how hard it was for us, and for Patrick, I'm sure you too, just watching it tonight, it's so befuddling and gobsmacking. This was plugged on television for weeks. And on top of that, WWF only had, at the time, 4 pay-per-views a year. So this was one of the 4 nights of the year you were expected to pay $20 to $25 to watch. So people watching this as it unfolded to see what this mystery egg hatching would be would then realize, oh, I paid money to watch this. And plus, this is Thanksgiving night. So you imagine having to convince your family, if you're a child or an adult wrestling fan, no, let's watch our one TV that we have together tonight to watch this pay-per-view, potential non-wrestling fans. All the stars are here. Hulk is here. Ultimate Warrior, Sergeant Slaughter. There's so much mystery and intrigue around what this egg is going to be. They wouldn't plug this for weeks unless we know it's going to be amazing. And then you get the Gooker. I just wanted to put this in full context of just why this is such a landmark, notoriously from the book of bad ideas. This is
it's since been referenced a lot, so it's like nowadays when you're watching it, you're waiting for it. But at the time it would have been a real disappointment. You would want something to be in there.
I watched it on my phone and I felt probably an equal level of disappointment as anybody watching it Thanksgiving night in 1990.
Yeah, can you imagine if someone was looking over your phone and asking you, so what you're watching?
They did. I was doing it at work.
Pornography. It's pornography, I swear.
Was this while you were teaching? Like, is this what you were showing the second graders? Like,
no, I was on prep. I was walking in the halls and be like, what the hell is that? Like,
was it the next pay-per-view that was like legendarily underattended or whatever? They had to switch arenas.
No, that was the WrestleMania after that. That was
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because the story with that, just a quick sidebar. WrestleMania 7 was supposed to be at the LA Coliseum, and they edited out on the version of the network that I saw, but they had been building for an entire year because the LA Coliseum, they wanted to break the WrestleMania 3 attendance record, which was 93,173, which I personally believe is the record. There's speculation on that, but I think that's what it is. And so they wanted to break it, and the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum holds over 100,000. And then when they wanted to think the only way we could sell this out is if we really rally, make it an America versus Iraq thing to tap into the headlines. Hence bringing in Sergeant Slaughter to really make it a whole USA versus Iraq thing. I thought this is we're gonna get that Lee Greenwald patriotism.
Oh, we'll get so many pro-Iraq fans in there too. This is gonna be awesome.
Well, let's reach out to Saddam, see if he'll make an appearance. But ticket sales, even like pre-sales, were very poor. Not necessarily poor, but it's poor compared to we weren't going to sell out 100,000. And in real life, though, Sergeant Slaughter and the wrestler who portrayed him, Minnesota native Bob Remus, he was getting like legitimate death threats because at that point there is a contingent of the wrestling audience who wasn't in on that. It was a performance. The characters, and they had found like his home address, and this is a guy whose kids go to school, and
yeah.
And then it was getting to the point where they would go out to eat at restaurants and servers would come up and say, sir, I can't advise you eat here because the chefs here know who you are and they do not like what you said about the troops. I cannot guarantee your food will be sanitary. There was like legitimate things. So Vince is like, the perfect excuse. So they said, due to a bomb threat and that we can't ensure security for our talent, we have to move from LA Memorial Coliseum and they went to somewhere much smaller. So that's the story with moving that.
If people didn't know wrestling was fake, what did they think? Gobbledygooker? Did they think that was a real turkey, like a giant mutant turkey? Is that the kayfabe answer for that?
Turkey? Yeah. So who knows? You can find like newspaper articles from the 20s, like having seen.
Yeah.
And so like the wrestlers themselves, maintaining kayfabe and maintaining the illusion and things like that. They would, say it's real, and I don't want to get in terms of real or fake. They would say it was an authentic sporting competition, and it would get a lot of, sporting coverage. ESPN would air AWA up until 1990, I believe, and and you would have like locally, local sports shows and sports sections would also cover the latest wrestling results. And then things got more cartoony as things getting leading onto it, and a lot of what did lead to wrestlers being open about it was Vince McMahon wanting to have a tax break.
Yeah.
So he said. And I think it was it Connecticut or New Jersey? He made the case where he said, this is not athletic competition. We should not be, paying a sports tax on it. We should not have to adhere to an athletic commission. And that's where the term sports entertainment came from, as opposed to sports. And so that made a lot of people hate it because I think that was the moment that people were told, what? It's not real? But the cat was out of the bag for a long time. That was just the first time someone in the profession said it. And personally, my theory, just when you look at wrestling in the frame of American pop culture, I think that's why it for so many years had such a stigma and probably still does, because the one thing Americans will not forgive you for, as much as we love a good forgiveness arc, is making us fools and lying to us and being caught that we're hoodwinked. And you can look at that in, the levels of politics now and conspiracy theories. There's people who believed outlandish things or follow people who would say outlandish things. And they, instead of admitting that they were, duped, that they were bamboozled, they find it more comfortable to just double down and remain stubborn in the face of logic. And you can find that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why to this day, there's still gobbledygooker truthers out there that maintain that he was a giant turkey. Anyway, we really need to move on.
Okay.
It's so long here. So we have the grand final Survivor match. This is Hogan, Warrior, and Tito Santana versus the Warlord, Ted DiBiase, Rick Martel, Hercules, and Paul Roma. So apparently they did line them up along heel and face lines.
I do want to say about this match, the promo right beforehand, which is, classic Hogan intensity and everyone going wild. And the fact when Warrior's talking about it and then he says, and the Tito Arrivederci. And it's like, Tito, he's not French. Like, that is, what? Like, yeah.
I also like in that promo that, like, whenever Hogan's talking, Warrior's like mugging in front of the camera, showing his muscles, and Hogan's trying to like grab the mic and be the first and the last one in there.
Yeah. There's a clip that's not on either of the versions we watched, but it has surfaced on YouTube of the pay-per-view countdown to get people to order the pay-per-view and to convince them to like make that last like real push and pledge to get them to order it. And so during that, when you have the Warriors talking, I think it's like Hawk is talking or Animal's talking, but for some reason the Ultimate Warrior has gone off camera, grabbed a roll of Scotch tape and returns and just like snorting and snarling and walking in circles, wrapping everyone around in Scotch tape. And their lives, they don't stop and going, Jim, what are you doing? They all just have to kind of go with being like, we're crazy and we're being Scotch taped. So, yeah.
That's where we get some more of that Ultimate Warrior poetry, the Destrucity, like, oh, these people who were eliminated, there are skeletons who have fallen in valor, and we will honor them. And as we go into this,
We've taken this many footsteps to get this far. The Hulkamaniacs that made the sacrifice, and the warriors that follow me that fell like skeletons that made their sacrifices. They walked with us into this battle, and we take all those that believe in one purpose to do combat with those that believe they are the greatest. You, power and glory, a reminder that we feed off such things. And you, Rick the Mono Martel, no competition to the powers that we possess in Hulkamania and Warrior Wildness and Arrivederci.
it was brilliant, though. I loved that.
It is. I'm guessing after this, Patrick, you're just gonna like start watching just like endless loops of like stitched together Warrior promo, just like because he is one you cannot stop watch.
Yeah, I think I do need to. I'm gonna go on Peacock and start watching some old stuff. I think I have to. I owe it to myself.
Coliseum Video Best of Ultimate Warrior VHS is in there. Coliseum Video Treasures section on Peacock. So
nice.
Yeah, a few years ago from trading, I got this. It's the Complete Ultimate Warrior. Because his run was like relatively short, so it's every appearance he ever had on WWE television, and it fits on 14 DVDs. DVDs hold 2 hours, so there's plenty to be found.
Well, his matches weren't long either, usually, right? Like I feel like his promos were bigger than his matches because he couldn't go. Like, what are you going to do with them?
Unless you meticulously planned it out, like Randy Savage, who again,
That's
why he's one of the best of all time.
That's it. And that match is actually pretty good. Although, doesn't he take like 6 like flying elbows or something ridiculous?
Yeah. Well, don't spoil it for Patrick. Patrick still has to watch.
Sorry. I didn't mean to spoil that for you.
Which also has the Slaughter Hogan match on it too. So you're in for a night of patriotic fun.
I love it.
Yeah.
So this is a lopsided card.
Yeah.
5-on-3.
This is the baby faces they're facing some major opposition here.
Yeah.
Warrior has some fresh face paint too.
Yeah, I imagine him taking the time, like in full warrior mode, just like saying his poetry and repainting his face. Not watching the hey Jim, you want to come watch the Gobbledygooker? No time, because as the ashes fall from asunder as the phoenix within the carbohydrates or whatever.
So good on Tito Santana for making it to the final round, but he gets eliminated by pinfall in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. No, Warlord does. Tito knocks him out instantly.
Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, you're right. I've got this wrong. Sorry. So he gets
Nobody was
eliminated about
expecting
2 minutes by Ted DiBiase, right?
Yeah, I wonder if they were like if Gobbledygooker or Slaughter's promo ran long, because this feels like the shortest match on the card. Like they kind of rushed through this, right?
Well, they never did this again, right? Like
Correct.
Survivor Series doesn't do this.
This is the only time they ever did it. And I think, and the thing is, I don't think it's a bad concept. I think it's just maybe the execution, or it's just everyone wanted to get away from the idea of the 1990 Survivor Series with the Gooker stink on it so much.
Yeah.
No one wanted to revisit it or remind people of it.
Should be like a elimination, like a 4-way elimination match or something for like one person to win, you know, a la Royal Rumble, where it's like there's no friends or something.
Yeah.
It's like there'd be more drama in that, I think.
No, I like this friendship storyline that goes throughout the whole thing. Like, I really like that.
The bonding
teams. Yeah.
But the funny thing is that like Warrior and Hogan, they don't really come across as friends. Like they come across as like, you know, they're trying to make money or whatever. But like even Hogan comes in, like when Warrior's getting the final pin, Hogan's running in and he's counting the pin alongside the ref. Like, I have to be in the frame.
Yeah. Hogan must pose, brother.
I loved the ending though, when they both say, where it's like who is it? Hogan lifts the rope for Ultimate Warrior, and Ultimate Warrior is like, no, I'm gonna hold that rope for you, brother. Oh, dude, are you kidding me?
Guess.
That was a moment of beauty. That was like real fraternity. That was just like band of brothers type shit, dude.
Maybe I'm just too
Maniacs
cynical.
and the Warriors could finally link arms and be like, "This is our team tonight."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That didn't move you, Kyle? Are you being serious right now?
Not even your bowel?
Yeah, not at all. No, I mean, but I think I've just, because I've seen this whole sort of run and I know a little bit more backstage, you know, and the politics between Warrior and Hogan. And
that should make it more meaningful.
You got to separate the art from the artists.
That's it. But the thing about Hogan is that he's such a fucking heel. Like, even though he's like the greatest babyface of all time, he's always doing heel things. He's like pulling people out of the ring, and he's like cheating like crazy, and you know, just like screwing over his friends,
spanking and kissing women who are the valet.
And so, you know, it's just, I don't know. I have trouble seeing it. I guess the kayfabe is broken there. So what's everyone's highlight of the show?
Of intentional entertainment, my highlight is I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed DiBiase and Brett.
Me too.
Together. I'd say in terms of like the overall highlight, it's man, this is one of those, you know, there's the Brett producer Blockhead has a theory that all entertainment is on a horseshoe shape, where like the absolute best, like well done art and entertainment is on like one end of that horseshoe. The absolute worst is on the other end of that. And you get the same joy from watching something that's either really, really good or really, really bad. And the average stuff in the middle is the bottom forgettable parts. So with something like Survivor Series 1990, like it really feels like the worst lowlights of it are that high part of the horseshoe.
Well, we did pick this one because it like notoriously bad, right? Like so there's a lot to talk about. And I think the thing about that sort of horseshoe theory that you're talking about is that when things that are bad, that are so bad they're good, they're only that way if the people doing them kind of don't realize that it's bad. So there's a lot of things that are like trying to be so bad they're good, but when you're kind of aware of it, it doesn't work.
Right, yeah. I think also too, just like even as not great as it is, it's still a breezy watch. Like WWF had their, you know, programming, their pacing down pretty bad, so it's a fun little nostalgia trip. So there are definitely worse, even like of this era. There's worse WWF pay-per-views as a whole.
Well, this whole era stands on the strength of the characters, you know, like because mostly the wrestling's not that great, you know, other than the, you know, you get Bret Hart and Ted DiBiase in there for 3 minutes or whatever.
I'd say my highlight, tugboat.
Oh, well, that goes without saying. Like, yeah, it's just...
I forgot to mention this, but during the match that Tugboat's in, there's a part where like the announcers forget he's there. Gorilla Monsoon says, "Well, it's down to just Hogan," and the camera kind of pans over. He's like, "Oh, and Tugboat's still there." And then Roddy Piper goes, "No. Oh, yeah, he's still there."
All right, my genuinely favorite part was that ending with
Hulk Hogan
and Ultimate Warrior. Yeah,
What a
literally
mark.
Can you imagine being home with your family on Thanksgiving and you're having that togetherness with your family? You're happy to see the WWF family of Hogan and Warrior together. That's really what the spirit of the holiday is about.
You've been fighting with your brother all day over, who gets to sit at the end of the table or whatever, and that comes on, and you're like, we're family.
Well, listen, your parents saw the gobbledygooker, and they're like, we're going to turn it off, and you convince them, don't turn it off, just please, it'll be over soon. Then you get to watch that. And here's the other sub-highlight. After they both get out, they're both standing on the edge of the ring, just like flexing, and it's like their glistening bodies, and it's the most like, I don't know, it's borderline pornographic.
Oh my God, they got like the up the dick hole shot when they get on, and then they turn around and give you the sort of the rear shot.
Well, Coliseum Video, the company who distributed this on VHS, was actually the name they'd used for wrestling, but it was a porno tape company.
Yeah.
Oh, I could tell. I could tell that those videographers knew what they were doing.
At erotica. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, your highlight. You didn't give us your highlight.
Yeah, what's your highlight?
Oh, I didn't say mine. For me, it was the Bret Hart thing for sure. I've seen this a few times, and I always forget about that. And then, I'm always on the edge of my seat when I see it, and it's so good to see. That's probably the main thing for me. I mean, the gobbledygooker's kind of funny. It's fun to see Mean Gene dancing around there.
Poor Gene.
But yeah, definitely the Bret Hart thing. That always gets me.
I will say another highlight for me is I love Axe's hair in this. I think like the meme is justified. It's a beautiful head of hair, just the ultimate level of some guy going out, just like totally checked out of his job. Because you can tell, like even in like when they have the promos for like for that team at the beginning of the show, Demolition aren't in their face paint. You can clearly see beneath their black masks. They have their unpainted faces, and they just look like let's get this over with.
That's because they know they're gonna have to wear them later for the like Hogan Warrior orgy.
Yeah.
The other Coliseum video.
I will say, Patrick, on the subject of Warrior, and I can't believe this slipped my mind till now, I am so jealous that you get to watch this certain amazing piece of art for the first time. Kyle, you may have seen this, and if not, I'm jealous you both get to experience it. At the dawn of the DVD era, WWE realized, hey, there's money in nostalgia. Let's make documentaries about all of our old famous wrestlers. WWF wanted to have the involvement on one on the Ultimate Warrior, but Warrior being a notoriously stubborn, challenging person to deal with, the deal fell through. It's a longer story later. But as a result, super petty Vince McMahon made a DVD-long documentary of it. Basically, when you start a new job and you hear people talk about the former coworker they used to work with who everyone hated and everyone had terrible stories about him.
Yeah.
Feature-length version of that, but it's about the Ultimate Warrior.
Is that the self-destruction?
The Ultimate Warrior. It's honestly something that even my friends who are not wrestling fans at all own, because it is an amazing 90-minute piece of cinema. And you just see like everyone, it channels his whole career and like the zeitgeist of him getting popular and just talking about all these horrible things and how awful he was to deal with backstage and all these different stories. And even like the younger talent who met him like years later have stories about him. And I cannot recommend enough the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior. Before your head hits the pillow tonight, play it in class tomorrow. Say instead of reading books today, we're watching this wrestling documentary. So, but yeah, I highly recommend it. It's not on Peacock because one of the terms of when he did come back into the fold, like 72 hours before he died in 2014, was they had to like never acknowledge it again. So the DVD went out of print. And they made like two.
Oh, what a baby! What a baby!
But yeah, it still should be on YouTube.com. The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
I'm looking it up.
It is.
That's
so
YouTube.com.
Yeah, www.youtube.com.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks for being on.
I think this was fun. I'm glad we could come together. And hey, let's make this our new Thanksgiving tradition every year. We'll watch it.
Well, I do Canadian Thanksgiving. So
Try to do good each and every day. Don't give up nothing bad to say. Always go swimming with a buddy. Work real hard and always study. If you want to be real cool, don't be so stupid and play the fool. Get your education each and every day. These are all the things that the maniacs say. I wanna be a Hulkamaniac. Have fun with my family and friends.
Here we are, Kyle, at the begging and groveling department.
Patrick, it seems like only a moment ago we were just introducing the show, and here we are. We've come to the end. Time flies when you're just podcasting or listening to podcasts.
We're slinging the casts nonstop.
That's because we want you to like and subscribe, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. We want you to join the Patreon.
Patreon.com/PotterZB.
It's PotterZB. I figured out how to do that.
Excellent.
But it was a string of numbers.
A vanity URL.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like my license plate that says P guy. No further explanation needed. All right, what else? And you can send us letters. You can send us letters at podrzebiepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, make sure in the subject line that it says idiot mail, and make sure that you address us, dear idiots. The salutation of your letter should be dear idiots, hello idiots, anything along those lines.
Yeah. And if not, we'll make fun of you.
Yeah.
Chaz, normally we do like an intro and an outro, but we'll just splice you in. So where can we find your stuff?
You can find me anywhere that you can type the 8 magic letters at CHAZRAPS. It's Twitter at Chaz Raps, Instagram at Chaz Raps. You can also find my music on Spotify. You can find my music on Bandcamp. You can find me on air for The Current, the NPR affiliate here in Minnesota at thecurrent.org. You can find the public access stations I broadcast manage at SPEAK MPLS. That's Speak MPLS, SpeakMinneapolis.com. That's just the 9 letters, speakmpls.com. That's the domain. It's not that full explanation I just said. And you can find me in the hearts of millions. Dozens. I'm in the hearts of dozens. I'm not going to over.
Kyle, where should they go if they want more of you and less of me?
Well, you can find me at my website at kylebridget.com. There you can hire me to draw you a picture or teach you how to draw a picture or, give you a flying elbow drop off the top turnbuckle. That's one of my specialties. Where else? Everywhere else I'm at Little Cozy Nostril, including at YouTube, where I do a show called Canonically Crumb, where I explore the comics and characters of R. Crumb's Crummyverse. And hey, why not buy the official Podrzebie t-shirt and fly your idiot flag everywhere you go? Available, link in the description.
Oh, send me the image of that so I can make a button. If you want to check me out, youtube.com/@flippinthrough. If you want an Irish slap across the chest of weekly Mad Magazine videos and semi-weekly live streams on Sunday evenings, where we do everything from playing video games, flipping through Cracked, Mad, Help, various other humor magazines, or just jaw-jacking.
Just jacking it.
Just jacking it. Come jack it with me on camera.
And it gets hot, folks, so you won't need to bring your jacket. Anyway, we'll be back in 2 weeks with more Podrzebie podcast.
Hey, thanks for watching. Wait. Hey, thanks for listening.
By the way, Ed, how's your mom?
Such a great year, dude.
Yeah, it's like the last year where you can just be a total fuck up and it doesn't matter. Then 3rd grade rolls around and it's like, you better get your shit together.
Yeah, and you're given homework and taught how sex works. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.